I'm excited. Third episode. Eddie Zacharek. Been talking to you for a little bit now. You were recommended by one of my last guests. And I'm impressed with your story, man. And I really think you have a lot of information that the people need to hear. I mean, stuff that people in the community that me and you have been in refuse to really come out and say because of the scrutiny and all that stuff. But I want to do a quick introduction for people who don't know you, Eddie. Eddie's a decorated detective with the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department. And not Montgomery County like in Houston, but Montgomery County. Yeah. It's a police department, right? There we go. You guys do things weird up in the East Coast,
yeah,
right?
And I'll explain all that to where it was, yeah.
So, you know, Eddie's a decorated detective up in the D.C. area, and he's been on top of some big cases. And not only that, he's a detective in a really, really specialized unit when it comes to firearms. And Eddie has been on some big cases that we're going to talk about today, and some things that have never really become public. And you're gonna talk about them today that maybe a lot of your colleagues and stuff just never really came public with them, but we're gonna talk about them today and let the viewers, listen. So I'm excited about that. But
thank
Eddie,
you for having me.
No,
I appreciate it.
It's an honor, man. It's an honor. And we go into your life now as what you're doing with your actual business of, airbrushing and stuff. It's crazy. You go taking these people to jail to now airbrushing motorcycles and stuff like that. That's awesome, man. And I think your contribution to the veteran community and stuff is great. Just like you said, you're doing guitars for the, Gold Star families and stuff. That's awesome, man. Those people need us more than ever.
Absolutely, 100%. Now more than ever.
Exactly. Their loved ones, gave all for us. So the least we can do is show them some support. And I'm glad you're doing that, Eddie. It's great.
Thanks.
Good. So now that we've introduced you, and I could sit there and say decorated, and the book is over there on the other side of this room. You've got, it's a damn big binder with amazing awards that have been in there, putting down some evil monsters and making you such a good detective. But in looking at some of those awards right now, skimming through them, some of these things are not your typical, somebody just broke into Target and stole things. This is people who are even trying to put down our president.
Correct.
And you've went after them, and you've done, amazing work as a detective. I bet that's a damn interesting career. And I say interesting because I just wanted to save some of the words for later, but you've gone down through things that I'm sure have taken a toll on you mentally, physically. As
Absolutely.
we know, you retired medically from the police department. And we're going to put it all out today, and I'm excited for that. So where I want to start is, tell me a little bit about yourself as a kid growing up. Where are you from?
So my father, thanks for having me on the show.
No,
I appreciate it.
I'm thankful for you, man.
My father was a World War II veteran in the Navy. He was on a submarine tender. And after he got out of the Navy, he was in the VA.
Okay.
Met my mom. I was actually born in Little Rock, Arkansas, so I'm a southern kid. Yeah. And we moved around a lot because he was in the VA. I've lived in Delaware. I've lived in Maryland. I lived in Albany, New York. And we kind of finally settled down in the Washington, D.C. area in Montgomery County. So just to give the viewers about where this area is I'm talking about, if they're not from the Mid-Atlantic, Montgomery County is the county that borders northwestern Washington, D.C. and the Potomac River in the state of Maryland. When I was there, the population was around 1.2 million people living in the county. So it is a major metropolitan area, and it was a major metropolitan police department. I went to college. I went to college in Frostburg, which is Western Maryland. Graduated in political science. I took a lot of constitutional law classes because I wanted to do pre-law. I want to go to law school. And during the time I was in school, I was like, man, I want to be the police. I want to go chase bad guys. I want to drive fast, carry a gun, and chase bad guys. And you don't hear people say that. You're like, man, you sound crazy. That's really what I wanted to do. I want to drive fast. I want to chase bad guys and carry a gun. And not for anything but when I lived in Montgomery County and I grew up there, I saw the county change. And I saw it change from a really nice place to live, and it started the slow decline. And the crime rate rose. And I wanted to fight that, and I wanted to make a difference. And anyway, I applied to 6 different police departments right before I graduated college, and I got hired by all 6. Montgomery County Police was one of them. And I chose to go there because at the time they were one of the most prestigious police departments in the Washington, D.C. metro area, just because of where they were, the accreditation from CALEA that they have, which is basically the agency that credits law enforcement agencies for high integrity and professionalism, and the type of people who I've met who work there that were just great people. And that's where I went. So I became a police officer in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
So it was nothing like today.
Correct.
So the mid-90s was like literally right after Rodney King happened. So some of the policies has changed on the police department. Like, for example, they no longer teach the lateral vascular neck restraint anymore. I learned that. Yeah. I've actually used that on people.
Yeah.
It works. So 1997, I started the academy, and I graduated the academy, and then I was assigned to Rockville District Patrol. So when you go to the academy, basically everybody. So our academy, we had Montgomery County Police, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. So the sheriffs in our county did fugitive, court and transport, and courtroom security. And they had a domestic violence unit. We had Gaithersburg City Police. We had Rockville City Police. Our academy also did Montgomery County National Capital Park Police. So we had all these different agencies in our academy class. Yeah. So after I graduated the academy, it was about 6 months long. I was assigned to the Rockville District as a patrol officer. So for the viewers who are not law enforcement, so back in the 90s when I went through the academy, we were hazed heavily.
I think the word hazing nowadays is forbidden.
Right. Like, I don't know what goes on at the academies now, but I assure you, we had a fire tower that was behind our academy, and we were made to run up it. I think it was 6 stories tall. We were made to run up it frequently and do push-ups and sit-ups on every level, and run. We had to do log. Remember, I don't know if you guys ever see the special operations where they make them do log push-ups and run with logs. Yeah, we had to do that. Had fireworks. Bottle rockets shot at us when we were running, and so we were hazed. It kind of molds you into
builds character
for
That's
sure.
Right. I think not to interrupt you, Eddie, but I think that's something people don't understand with law enforcement nowadays. Is everybody, the whole defund the police and all that nonsense. These people want soft officers on the streets.
Right.
And what they don't understand is you get this kid who graduates college or high school, whatever, this really good kid, has a perfect resume, never been in a street fight in his life or anything. And this is the kind of example of what people want to be a police officer. Well, this kid's expected to eventually go and apprehend some of the baddest dudes on this planet.
Yeah.
Some of the most scariest dudes who they've been around.
They want to kill you too.
Exactly. And now you expect this kid to not immediately react towards his gun.
Right.
I mean, and I'm not going to get into too much detail just now. We can get into this later. But I feel like law enforcement, we have failed some of our officers. We give them this initial, introduction to defensive tactics and firearms training and everything. But we don't give them the true. I mean, and I'm not saying we isn't everyone, because I'm sure some departments are really damn good at this.
Right.
But we have failed some officers to where we don't give them that reality of, hey, you're about to go put some of the baddest dudes in the planet into jail.
Yeah.
And you need to have some, you need to have some mental toughness and some physical toughness.
Right.
Because I get it. Some of these guys are scared. That's why they go straight to that firearm. And I'm not saying every shooting in law enforcement is unjustified or anything, but a lot of the unjustified shootings that you've seen, I'm pretty sure there's one common denominator, and that might have been fear in the officer.
Right. I think what I've always told and what I've been trained, so backing up a little bit, I did 4 years of ROTC, and I was offered a commission in the Marine Corps to be a Marine officer to go to Quantico.
Yeah.
Paperwork was signed by the recruiter, you're going to Quantico. I turned it down. I turned it down, and people were upset with me. And I basically was like, look, I want to be the police. I don't want it.
You want to be a damn jarhead.
Well,
and for the viewers, I say that playing around. I'm a Marine.
Because you were a Marine. Yeah. Right. You know what I mean? So half one dozen of the other. Do I think I would have made a good Marine officer? Yes.
Yeah.
Am I glad I chose the path that I chose? Yes.
I'd say so.
You know what I mean?
Just looking at your awards.
I would do it all over again and get hurt and injured again because of the things that I've done. You know?
So Eddie, you grow up knowing that you want to be a police officer. You go to the police academy, get in, you become a patrol officer. How does that work out for you? How does that start?
So, oh man. When you're so I was 21, so I got hired when I was 20 years old. I turned 21, and now imagine being 21 years old. You graduate the police academy, and there's a lot of young officers in our academy.
Yeah.
For the most part, everybody in our academy class had a 4-year degree or higher. There was guys who are U.S. Army Rangers in our class. There was DEA agent in our class. He used to be prior DEA. So there was a lot of esprit de corps in our academy class. And everybody was a tight-knit group. So you're given all this, I don't want to say power, it's more like responsibility. That you basically go out into the world and say, after 6 months, here you go.
Yeah.
Now, I had really, really great field training officers who trained me.
Not like mine. Well, one of mine. Like our story from earlier.
Yeah. And the field training officers I had were awesome. You know what I mean? Everything from showing the ropes to how to write a report and what to do in certain emergency situations. And the one thing that I was an FTO and I was a field training detective as well. So the new detectives that came in or somebody who did a temporary assignment with us, I kind of took them under my wing and showed them. Your gun is your ace card.
Yeah.
You don't have to pull your gun out all the time. Your gun is your ace card. So, and I did drug interdiction. And I've been to drug interdiction schools with the DEA and Maryland State Police. So, what's the old saying? You catch more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. And I think what's lacking now than it was not lacking back then is the police officers, the guys that I worked with knew how to talk to and relate to people. And if you know how to talk and relate to people, you can get them to do almost anything you want to do.
I think this is something actually me and you talked about right now on our way here to the studio is when I had my moments in law enforcement, right? I told you I was good in getting drugs off traffic stops and stuff. And I told you a little bit of my personal life. Obviously, I wasn't in that kind of world, but I was around it. And I knew what it was like. So I kind of related a little bit. And so that was an easy way to kind of like talk to people and get into them. And I think that's kind of where we veered away from in law enforcement is we want this perfect picture on a resume. And we've veered away from finding those young kids who have, lived life a little bit. I'm not saying you have to be a criminal or a terrible person to become a good cop. What I'm saying is sometimes it's okay to let that person that's been maybe arrested by, when he was a teenager for, running from the cops from a party or something like that.
Right.
There's some departments that'll like literally be like, no, you're done.
Yeah.
And I get it. Some of those things, like we've talked about it right now, even when we both were in law enforcement. There's people we knew that were up to no good. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Not every human being is perfect, right? And, sometimes it's okay to let somebody get that chance to try to make a name for themselves or do something good for themselves.
Yeah.
Just because they got arrested for underage drinking or something like that. How
many people
has
here in
not
this room?
underage drink? I mean,
I did.
I mean, the guy filming this right now for us, I'm pretty sure he's laughing over there because he knows he's probably done it.
And when we were growing up, and maybe this is a generational thing, everybody drank underage.
Yeah.
We were just, we were responsible about it. We didn't drive a car, but
I played soccer and I
it?
would cross over to Mexico to play soccer because I lived in a border town. And sometimes after soccer training, we would go to the store, and just buy beer. And I wasn't even of age to drink, but I looked of age for the most part. I'd buy beer and go have a good time.
Right.
You don't see me like being this evil monster and, I'm not a bad person.
Exact opposite.
I'm not a perfect person, but I'm a decent human being. And I think that's the problem today is we see that, and it's not because I know departments don't want to. It's what society has driven them to do. That acceptance, because you have people trying to defund the police. Look at Austin, for example, Texas. I grew up in Texas. I was afraid to break the law when I was a kid. I was like, oh shit. Underage drinking was my thing, right?
Yeah. With the Texas police, don't mess around.
Don't mess around.
You know what I mean?
But
just like Florida.
Yeah. In fact, I was just in Florida the other day. You obviously know. And I was telling my wife, she's like, Dad, there's cops everywhere. I was like, they're like Texas here. They don't play. They're all over the place.
Right.
But even Texas has gotten somewhat lenient because of this new society we live in. Like Austin is a prime example. You defunding the police and everything. What the hell is that for?
Yeah.
And then now people are complaining. I just saw recently big tech companies or Austin's getting the crime rates going up. The cost of living's going high. Well, you did that. You did that to yourself. You wanted to mimic California, and you did it. And the crime rate going up is because what did you do? You wanted the police to get defunded and not be who they were before.
Right.
And then now you're upset because they're breaking into your house.
Yeah. And, so doing what I did and then basically now that I'm out of all of this and I look this from like outside the snow globe per se.
Yeah.
If I were the mayor of a city, I would want
a terrible mayor.
But just think about this. Why would you not want to hire the very best police officers to protect you, your family, and your constituents and make it the safest city in America? Why would you not want to do that?
Why not? Yeah, I know. And
you know what I mean?
Eddie, I'm about to probably piss a lot of my viewers off. Well, some of them, because I know a lot of them agree with me. We just saw this recently with Donald Trump's assassination attempt.
Yeah.
You saw the Secret Service, who's supposed to be the best of the best, make it, excuse my language, an ass of themselves. Maybe not all of them, but this whole DEI hiring or whatever the heck you call it, whatever acronym it is.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think it's called.
Myself and my last guest on the podcast, who was a Green Beret, Arizona State police officer, he applied for the Secret Service. Myself, I applied for the Secret Service, but apparently at the time we were not a good fit for it. You have to ask yourself overlooked. Why. And then you see what you saw the other day. And I'm not saying, look, I can Monday morning quarterback it all day, but I promise you I'd have done a way better of a goddamn job than that girl did. She dropped her gun off of the stage. That's embarrassing.
It's really bad.
It makes us look bad as a nation because that's who's protecting our presidents.
Right.
Biden, I don't care who it is. That's who's protecting them.
It's bad.
It's embarrassing.
It's very embarrassing.
It's very embarrassing.
But
this is what America has made law enforcement into be nowadays.
Right. And this is coming from what I used to do. I used to work hand in hand with the Secret Service. We had a Secret Service agent assigned to us.
Yeah.
And I've been to the Secret Service Academy. I've trained at the Secret Service Academy with agents. So to see that happen, I just sat in the chair and I nodded my head. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
What are you guys doing?
This episode is brought to you by Team Room Tactical. Team Room Tactical was founded by Green Beret veterans to honor the culture and history of our armed forces. At Team Room Tactical, they offer a premier Cerakote and laser engraving service. They specialize in elevating your firearms and an extensive array of products to new levels of personalization and sophistication. Their team of skilled individuals combine state-of-the-art technology with meticulous craftsmanship to bring your visions to life. Whether you're looking to add a unique touch to your firearms, enhance the aesthetic of your accessories, or create memorable gifts, they offer a tailored experience to meet your individual needs. From vibrant color schemes to intricate engravings, they take pride in delivering unparalleled quality and attention to detail. They transform ordinary items into extraordinary pieces that reflect your style and personality with their custom Cerakote and laser engraving services. Head on over to teamroomtactical.com and get your custom services done by these guys. Amazing dudes doing amazing things. Go check them out. teamroomtactical.com. So Eddie, not to get back, let's backtrack a little bit. So you joined the Montgomery County Department. You guys sheriffs or police department?
So,
because I want to get it right.
Yeah. So we were the
East Coasters are crazy.
Police department. We were full service.
Yeah.
In our county, we had Gaithersburg City Police,
okay,
Rockville City Police, which they are basically city police officers within the city.
Yeah.
Answered calls for service. Everybody got along.
Yeah.
There was no animosity or anything like that. And the sheriff's office basically did court security, warrant and fugitive, and they had a domestic violence unit. We had the Maryland State Police. So in our county, MSP, we called them Maryland State Police, MSP. They handled anything on the interstate.
Okay.
In other parts of the state of Maryland, they were full service barracks. So they would run calls for service just like we would. But the funny thing is, you hear horror stories about other agencies not getting along. It was not like that in Maryland.
Yeah.
Everybody got along when I was there, working cohesively together, helping one another. You know what I mean? Whatever one agency needed, we would help them. And whatever they needed, we would help them in return. So I get through FTO. I spend some time on the road, and an opening comes up on what's called the Lincoln Park Task Force. It's called the Adam 3B team, which at the time, it was an all-black neighborhood, and it was a 24-hour open-air drug market, 24 hours a day. So it was basically, there was 5 of us, 5 officers from Montgomery County Police, and there was a Rockville City officer, there was a Montgomery County sheriff, and then like Rockville City had a sergeant or corporal assigned. So we all worked together in this area, probably 3-4 square miles at most, to try to combat the drug crimes and just the open air drug market and the quality of life for the citizens of this area.
Yeah.
I did that for approximately 5.5, almost 6 years.
Yeah.
During that time, I was shot at. I was stabbed in the collarbone. I was struck by lightning twice. I was bit by the canine dog. I got hit by a car.
Jesus.
So that all happened within that span of time. So some crazy stories. So I will tell people. So any police officers now who are listening to this, or any of you guys who are thinking about becoming the police, is like I said before, you catch more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. Back in the day, during the 90s, there was this huge push for community policing. So what is community policing? Community policing is going out to understand and know your members of your community to help them help you fight crime, and make quality of life better for the citizens of the area. So what's that mean, really? That means getting out of your police car, going into businesses, meeting business owners, working hand in hand with business owners and community leaders to try to improve the quality of life or addressing issues that the community might have. And when you start building these relationships, that's where you build the trust with the community, with the police. You know,
I think that's something I remember when I became a police officer. My dad drove me to the new town I was going to be a cop in, and I was new to the town. It was a snowstorm going into there. I don't know what the fuck I'm getting into. My dad told me something. My dad's been in the system. He was arrested by the feds many years ago. Did his time and everything, and he tells me, he's like, I want you to know something, Chris. What you're about to do is you're going to take people's freedoms away. He goes, but I want you to make sure that you don't take their dignity away. No matter how monsters they are, you don't take their dignity away. And I promise you, those same people will respect you.
Yeah.
And I was like, at the time, like, young kid, like, what the fuck are you talking about?
And
whatever.
The people who I worked with said the same very thing to me.
And the community policing thing, I used to get off my car, my unit. I'd go play soccer with the kids. I knew some of the most crappiest dudes in the neighborhood. But you know what? I was always ahead of the game. People would tell me sometimes shit was going down in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
One, they didn't want the heat on them. And they knew somebody stupid was doing something. They'd let me know. I converted so many heroin addicts and meth heads into snitches for the department than other officers. Why? Because I knew them. I made a relationship with them. Doesn't mean I'm hanging out with them, going out to dinner with them or anything.
But they knew. And they
knew
could trust you with information.
And you know how many times I got my ass kicked on the streets?
Probably zero.
Yeah. One time I got in a fight the fight for my fucking life. And the crazy part is somebody I had put in jail was the person that actually came and helped me in that fight. It says a lot.
It does say a lot.
You've taken this person to jail and they came out and backed you up. I'm talking my badge was gone, my fucking radio. Of course, the radio is the first thing that always goes.
Oh, yeah. It falls off your belt right away.
And this person came and backed me up. Man, I had so much respect for that guy after that. I erased all my thoughts about that person. I was like, that fucking guy, he's a stand-up dude. Mind you, he's a bad guy.
Yeah. And I think that's what's missing now from American law enforcement. Mm-hmm. That's missing. We need to bring that back for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So, Eddie, you're with the Montgomery County Police Department. You said, now I got it right? I'm giving you the sheriff title over here. We do it a little different down here in Texas. But so when you're with the department, you get into this task force with firearms and all that good stuff. How does this task force come about? How does this work out for you?
So basically, after I worked in Lincoln Park, a job opening came up, and basically 6 or 7 people applied for this job to be a detective. I went and did the interview. So they look at your arrests, they look at your convictions, you know what I mean? What have you done? And they basically do an oral board, and they ask you a series of questions, and I got the job. So during the time of everybody, some of the younger listeners might not know, but the DC serial sniper was going on. So Montgomery County Police, during the serial sniper, established a temporary task force to investigate, prosecute, and go after violent armed career criminals and put them in jail during this time when this was going on. It was a temporary task force. And it consisted of the Montgomery County Police, the Sheriff's Office, U.S. Secret Service. There was an ATF agent somewhere mixed in there somewhere, and Montgomery County National Capital Park Police. I was not part of that when that happened because I was still working on the road when all that was going down. Or I was working in Lincoln Park.
Yeah.
It was so successful and they arrested so many people and took so many illegal guns off the street that the chief of police wanted to make this a permanent fixture of the police department. So I was one of the original detectives that was a part of this unit. And it was one of the first units in the country that actually did this.
So before we get into a little bit more of the history of the people you put behind bars in this unit with guns and all that stuff, let me ask you something. What's your take on us as Americans owning guns? And because mind you, you took people to jail for this.
Right.
What's your take?
So I'll tell you a little brief story. I gave a lot of speeches and I had to talk to a local gun club once, and I was going over state and federal firearms laws with them. And one of the guys stood up and raised his hand, and I called him. I said, "Yes, sir. Go ahead." He's like, "We're all scared you're going to take our guns away." I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "The guys that I work with, including myself, are the biggest supporters of the Second Amendment that you can imagine." I said, "Everybody should have guns." I said that we're targeting armed career criminals. We're not targeting law-abiding citizens. We're not going to go after you. You're not doing anything wrong. We're going after convicted felons. We're going after prohibited people. We're going after people who have been served with like an emergency petition, or Florida, they call them Baker Acted.
Yeah.
And taking their guns away from them. And I'm personally, the Second Amendment is I think, the most important amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah.
Why? Now you're going to ask me, why do I think that? Number one, because it deters us from a foreign invasion. Number two, it keeps us safe and secure from a tyrannical government. And I say that now because you've seen what has happened the past 4 years in this country.
It's dirty, man.
11 million unvetted illegal immigrants have come across this border in this country, and this government has let them in. And
how many confirmed terrorists in that number too? A lot.
A lot of confirmed terrorists, a lot of confirmed by you and I and our contacts in U.S. law enforcement and United States military are ISIS.
Yep.
A lot of them are confirmed Taliban that are here on United States soil.
Yep.
So now you see on social media a lot of people who are both active and retired, part of the military special operations community and law enforcement community, are speaking out about all this.
As we should.
And we're not saying this to invoke fear in people. We're telling you to prepare, and we're telling you need to pay attention to what's happening.
I think the problem with American citizens today is they think it has to be somebody in a suit in Washington to tell you these things so it could be reasonable and understandable. But I'm going to tell you something right now, and so the viewers can understand this, and you'll agree with me 100%, because when you were on the streets and when I was doing things with the military and the private sector and in the streets as a police officer, were any of those politicians out there with us? Never.
None.
They don't know what it's like. They don't see the evil me and you have seen daily. They don't know what it's like to look some of these damn career animals in the eyes. So for us to sit there and believe what they're saying is shocking to me. Shocking. You know, most people, and look, I don't want to get into politics too much.
Right.
You know, because it's messy. But most people today are willing to vote for somebody who's been part of a failed administration for the last almost 4 years, and now is expected to, you know, run us because one, she's a woman, and, you know, this, that, the other, but they don't see any of her failures, including the Afghanistan withdrawal, the Doha deal, which we all know is bullshit. It's stupid. You know, even Obama knew that the Doha deal was not quite ready for the United States yet and the Taliban, but here we are in this administration and we've allowed it to happen. Nasty. But these people are voting for this person because they hate another guy who, for the most part, says the damn truth. Sometimes, I mean, don't get me wrong. Is he a wild man with his words? He is.
Of course.
But let's look at his last run as a president. It wasn't that bad, other than mean tweets and saying things people did not want to hear. Here's the thing. Me, you, the guy videoing this podcast for us right now, Miguel, is a great soul over there. we all don't do well with getting the truth told to us. Nobody does.
No, of course
When we
not.
were growing up as kids, we were rebelling, right? Our parents were the most evil pieces of crap because they told us the truth. We didn't like it. And now we have this generation who's going against that. And then complaining about grocery prices being high. Why is it so hard to get a house? It's funny, I hear that all the time. Donald Trump made it so hard for us to get a house. No. I bought a house during the Trump administration. Bought one in the beginning of this administration. Wasn't that bad. Now I will not even try to go refinance my house.
Yeah, the interest rates are sky high.
I don't even want to buy a car right now. That's how expensive it is.
Yeah.
You know, and you got these people complaining about this, but I'm like, they got you on free school loans, right? Where are those free school loans at? They ain't there. And you got this generation who's believed that this is the way we should live, but then they complain about all the after effects of it. And then they blame the last administration for it. I'm like,
No.
The current administration has the full power.
Correct.
You know, we're now on the brink of World War III, maybe already in World War III. We got Iran trying to attack us. We just had troops last night get hurt in the Middle East.
I saw that too.
You know, we have, you know, a war in Israel, a war in Ukraine, and they blame Trump for that. I'm like, well, Trump's a communist because he agrees with Putin. There's a term, and I'm going to say it right now on this podcast, and I want people to hear it, whether you like it or not. There's a term, and I believe by this. You keep your friends close and you keep your enemies closer. Shaking hands with Putin and Kim Jong-un doesn't mean you're their fucking friend.
No.
It just means that you're right on their ass and you're letting them know, I'm watching you. But,
Well, did you see him when he met with the Prime Minister of Israel? He grabbed him by his arm, pulled him in. Mm-hmm. That's an alpha move.
Exactly. But the other guy right now is more worried about, you know, making sure that defense contracts are doing well.
So the money can go in his pocket.
Of course, man. A lot of people don't like to hear the truth, but it is. And again, I'm not going to get into that.
Right.
But so
that's all. We could do a whole nother podcast about that.
Yeah,
we're not going to do about that.
Yeah, we can go on for hours about this. But you know, so you're with the Montgomery County or Police Department, and you get into this unit. You start doing some pretty high value cases, and it's coming off of a time where. For the viewers that don't know, the DC sniper case was huge. I was in school during the time, and I remember our instructor, because we still had the chalkboard, our instructor would write down every victim, where they got killed, where they got shot. It was huge, man. The Americans were scared. It was scary because you had citizens getting gunned down at gas stations, bus stops.
Yeah.
You know, it was scary. And, you know, that was a big case. So this unit gets formed during that time for that reason. You guys start to go investigate some big cases. Me and you spoke about a very significant case that actually is mind-blowing to me because I didn't see it on media or anything. And now that I've looked it up afterwards, I see now some media sources that did cover it, but it didn't make national news like I think it really should have, right? Because, of course, people don't want to talk about that. I mean, it did come out some big outlets, but how far into this unit were you when the assassination plot was uncovered?
I think I did 10 years. I worked undercover on this as a detective for 10 years. And probably about 6 years in, this happened.
And this was during the Obama administration, right?
Correct. Yeah. The Obama administration. And we got a tip from an informant that 2 individuals were buying certain chemical precursors. And I'm not going to name them here just for operational security.
That's fine.
So I did a lot of cases with the bomb squad, and I've had a lot of explosive training, and with improvised explosive devices and other chemicals. So I contacted our bomb squad, and we co-authored a search warrant for a house, and we found improvised explosive devices. These 2 individuals were planning on attacking the presidential convoy with guns and explosives and wearing bulletproof vests. They had a whole entire map plotted out. One of the individuals, his father worked for the U.S. State Department and was buying him guns. So they were making TATP, which is a highly volatile explosive. It's very dangerous to make. And you almost need to be a chemistry student to make this because it's very volatile. Anyway, they were making pipe bombs. They had timers. They had directions on how to get to Site R, which is one of the military's nuclear fallout bunkers, per se. That's basically in Pennsylvania, north of Camp David. I mean, it's on Wikipedia now, so I can talk about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, after we uncovered this search warrant and all of this evidence, I actually called both of them to the station for an interview. One of them basically confessed. The other one basically lawyered up, left the station, and did a carjacking to try to get away and get out of the area. Long story short, both of them were apprehended and arrested. And at that time, based on what we found, the dad was arrested and charged with straw purchase. So what's a straw purchase? A straw purchase is buying a firearm for somebody else. Whether that person is prohibited or not, it's still illegal. It's a felony. It's a federal felony. And all this is uncovered. The FBI got involved. The Secret Service was involved. The CIA was involved. I met with one of the guys from the CIA, and I was actually standing in this is a pretty interesting story. I was standing in the deputy director of the Secret Service's office in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And I saw the entire timeline of 9/11 that was above the walls, wrapped around his whole office. And it was pretty mind-blowing to see everything from where they were trained when they learned how to fly the planes to the passports that they got accepted by the CIA to get the passports, the whole 9 yards. Got to see it all. One of them pled out guilty. The other one pled guilty after a motions hearing in U.S. federal court, and he ended up going to federal prison. And during the time, so when you're actually doing this, you're not really thinking about the ramifications or like what media is going to happen with the media when you're doing these cases. You're doing this investigation and you're doing it by the book.
Yeah.
Every single time I do everything the same to make sure everything is consistent. And sure enough, it ends up on the front page of the Washington Post. And the Washington Post keeps following it. So I actually have Washington Post articles inside in the book across, the studio. But it was definitely an eye-opener. You know what I mean? They had numbers to the White House staff and direct numbers to the White House briefing room and intelligence briefing rooms that nobody should have unless you have a TS clearance. So it was definitely a interesting, what I part it? Very complex, interesting case.
So during this whole case, now knowing what you know and everything, had there not been an informant and you guys investigated this case and arrested these individuals, do you think they could have gotten close to the president with what they already had planned and the routes planned?
100%. I think so.
So do you think
there was
a high possibility President Obama could have been assassinated by these two?
I think I foiled an assassination attempt on the president, yes. And that basically the CIA thought that as well. And the deputy director of the Secret Service thought that as well. They're like, wow. They just were like, when I presented this case to them, they were just like, they almost like a deer in the headlights look, like, what did you just uncover?
Like, holy shit.
Yeah, holy shit. What's happened? Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's I kind of had that throughout my whole career. Yeah. Like you dig and you dig and you dig and you talk to people and you do interviews and you work hard. Wow. and you just uncover all of this information.
Well, I have to say, Eddie, before we get more onto these cases, my hat's off to you, man. I congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
Because, regardless or not, and I want to say this on this podcast because everybody has this perception of, I'm going to tell you who I'm voting for. I'm voting for Donald Trump. That's just who I'm voting for. But just because we don't see eye to eye on who we're voting for and all that stuff doesn't mean we hate each other, man. And I'm thankful that a person like you was able to apprehend 2 suspects who were willing to assassinate the United States president. Whether I liked that administration or not, that's still our president, and we got to protect him.
Absolutely,
you know what I mean?
100%.
I would be distraught if I saw Joe Biden get assassinated right now.
Yeah,
I would.
That would be terrible.
It's terrible. Like, whether I like the man or not, he's still our president.
Yeah.
And whether we like to say that word or not, he still is. And for the fact that you were able to stop an assassination attempt on the president, like, I commend you for that, man. I know my word might not be as good as some of the awards that you have in there in that book, but you know what?
I appreciate it.
It's an honor to be sitting across from somebody that protected our president and actually stopped somebody, especially after what we've seen happen with our former president and how he was protected that day. My hat's off to the individuals that did go stand in front of him and willing to take a bullet for that man. But I have to say, I'm honored to be able to sit across from you right now and hear that story.
I
man.
appreciate that.
Yeah. So you wrap this case up, you get these guys into jail. Tell me some more about some of the other cases you dealt with in this department.
Basically, we worked a lot with informants. So how did I get informants? Some people would call the office. Some people that I reached out to from when I used to work in Lincoln Park, and I used to talk to people there. So I will tell the police officers who are listening to this and one of the tricks I used to do. I used to give out scratch-off lottery tickets, and I used to give out Newport cigarettes for information. And they would give you so much information. You would go spend $20 on scratch-offs, and you'd rip them up. And you're like, hey, man, let me get, such and such down the street. I know he's dealing, man. When's he picking up? Like, how much money is he holding? Tell me what you got. Here's a scratch off. If you win $1,000, dude, this is all you. I can't guarantee you're gonna win, man, but here. They're like, oh shit, man, you got me a scratch off? Yeah, he's driving this car. They would tell you the name of the dog. They would tell you where he's getting his drugs from, when he would pick them up. Like, they would tell you pretty much anything you wanted to know. They felt like you were doing something for them, and they would be like your best friend. You know what I mean? And we would get information like that. We would also work very closely with the gun stores. So the gun stores in Montgomery County, we did something called ammo logs, which a lot of people didn't know about. So I'm going to tell you what we did. So we worked very closely with the gun stores. So when the gun stores, somebody came in and bought ammunition, they would keep a log of it. If they didn't know you or didn't recognize you or you looked shady, they basically told the guys that came in, they're like, look, we're just doing this just to cover our ass. We're keeping a log of people who buy ammo because of the crime rate. They're like, yeah, sure, no problem. So they'd write their name, their driver's license number down, and then they would sign this form. Well, the gun stores then gave us this form, and sometimes the lists were 2 pages long of people who were buying ammo. Most of the people were just
stockpiling, having a good time.
But yeah, just buying ammo, having a good time, shooting, no problem. But we'd run everybody's criminal history who was buying ammo. Because under state and federal law, if you're a convicted felon, you're not supposed to possess ammunition.
Correct.
I think it's Article 18922C. I think. I'm pretty sure. I authored a lot of search warrants. So.
We'll have a lot of fact checkers on this that'll be like,
I'm sure
he's wrong. Okay, sorry, the book's not here.
It's been a while. Yeah. So I lost count. I lost count after 100 search warrants.
I was just seeing one of your awards right now. How many hundreds of search warrants you've done? Thousands.
I've probably been involved in the service of hundreds of state and federal search and seizure warrants. Literally, no lie.
Yeah.
I lost count after I authored over 100. I just lost count between apartments, cars, DNA, medical records. I executed a lot of search warrants. Both some with SWAT and some with our unit, and I'll get into that.
Yeah.
So anyway, we ran their criminal history, and if you came up a prohibited person, so what is a prohibited person? Somebody who's got a criminal record who's not supposed to own or possess any firearms or ammunition, right? Assault, second-degree assault, assault and battery, felony theft. In Maryland, it was if you stole something that was worth over $500, and I don't know what it is now because the laws changed, it was considered a felony.
Probably like 10 million now.
With DEI, I'm sure it's like $50,000.
In California, they encourage you to go steal shit.
It just doesn't matter because they just encourage you to take everything. But so we would run their name and come up, they're convicted of armed robbery, right? This is something that happened. So now we have this person who's convicted of an armed robbery who's buying ammunition. So now you have to ask yourself, why is a person who's been convicted of an armed robbery buying ammunition for a handgun? Yeah. Gee, I think they have a gun, right?
Maybe. Yeah.
Well, the judge seemed to think so after we articulated to the judge that why was this happening? And when I first got into the unit, when the judges all got to know us very well because we were in the judges' chambers getting search warrants all the time. So the first few times, probably the first dozen times I went in before the different judges, the judges would grill you with questions about how did you obtain this information? How do you know he lives here? But once they got to know you, then they would basically read over your search warrant and they would just sign it.
Yeah. Build that rapport with them.
Yeah. You built a rapport and
especially when you haven't screwed them over. You actually got in good warrants.
And I will tell all the viewers this. For all the times that of all of the drug seizures that we've had and all of the gun seizures we've had, the integrity was so high on our police department that nobody ever took drugs, money. There was kilos of cocaine that we found. I mean, there was machine guns. People were making sears, improvised explosive device. You name it, we found it. Indoor marijuana grows. Right before I got to the unit, they did a search warrant in Pennsylvania and they found human skulls that some guy possessed. So they did a big investigation up for murders.
Fuck.
So when we did these, because firearms cases basically overlap all these other criminal cases. You know what I mean? I actually did a case with auto theft, where a car dealership was replating Mercedes-Benz cars, like high-end S600 cars. They were replating the cars. They were then reporting them stolen to the insurance company. The guy was armed with a gun, and there was a gun stolen out of a car. I think that was how I got involved. They were then sending the cars overseas and then getting paid by Hamas for the cars back here.
So you're
talking about 3 times.
Yeah, paid 3 times was already a crime there, but you're talking about Hamas, the
terrorist organization.
No, well, they're not terrorists. They're good people, aren't they? I say that being sarcastic, right?
Yeah,
I've in the past done some stuff where Hamas was, a key player in what we were doing, and God, I swallow my words because it really sickens me to see that there's people, including people that I worked with in the past on my Facebook, agreeing with what Hamas does. Look, I don't agree with what Palestine, the whole, innocent kids and stuff getting killed and everything. I don't. Do I think the IDF might be taking a little bit too far? Yeah, I do, on some circumstances. But on others, no. Hamas is an evil organization.
Yeah.
And to hear you just say right now, like, oh, somebody's dealing cars and stolen cars and stuff with Hamas, I'm like, oh, shocking. I thought these people were good people, and they're fighting for, the greater good of Palestinian people. So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're all right.
It's just I went on my rant on there because I want the viewers to know this is the same people that some of our American citizens are tagging on our monuments in Washington and saying that this is freedom fighters.
Yeah. If you'd see what's happening in the UK right now with all of that.
Yeah.
Kind of back on track.
Yeah. Sorry.
So we would use different tactics. So in 10 years of going after armed career criminals, never not once were we ever in a shooting. And that kind of, looking back at that, kind of impresses me And I'm like, I try to think of why this happened. Like, you have all these people who are armed with guns. They're all criminals. And when I say criminals, they've had violent felony convictions or they were mentally insane. You know what I mean? And never not once we were in a shooting. I'm like, why did we not get into a shooting? Were we lucky? Maybe. Or maybe it was just the tactics we used.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah.
We used ruses to get people out of houses. Like, we staged an accident. We got people out of houses by staging accidents. When we did takedowns, we would have them come out of the house, or we would do surveillance and basically do a felony stop with the surveillance, or just do a plain Jane traffic stop for speeding or improper lane change. And they would never think that they were being stopped for any gun violations.
I think that's interesting you say that, because in my past as a SWAT operator, a lot of the people thought I was doing the cool, sexy stuff that you see on, Hollywood, right? Kicking down doors, blowing up doors and stuff.
And we've done plenty of that too.
Yeah, you do that too. But a lot of your big takedowns were, believe it or not, catching them off guard. Because it's all about the surveillance and the work you put in prior to that. Right. That's going to make sure that you, me, everybody else that's on that op comes home safely. You don't want to go out there guns blazing every single time, because that's asking for trouble.
No.
Because remember, you're still startling these people. They don't know if you're a bad guy or who you are. So you got to play it smart. And believe it or not, some of the most impressive takedowns we had were with people caught off guard.
Yeah, and that's what we caught them off guard. And when we would do search warrants, so basically, I would author a search warrant for a house. And then if the guy was really, really bad and we wanted to get into the house, and the guy was a violent convicted felon for like murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, I would sick the SWAT team on them.
Mm-hmm.
So they were violent convicted felons. We had them at an address. So 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, we'd hop in, and I would actually ride with SWAT in the SWAT van and point the door. And basically our job as detectives was on our task force is we would take care of anybody who bailed out of the house. So if there was a shooting or anything that happened inside the house, that was the SWAT team's responsibility. Anything that came out of the house was our responsibility. So we formed a perimeter around the house. And we usually had a uniformed car with us just to position outside of the house. And you do the search warrants at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and they're dead asleep. And there would never be anybody that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody got shot. So basically, that's what you want to try to do as a police department. If you're going to catch bad guys, you want to minimize the risk and try to create the least path available to make an effect and arrest.
Yeah.
Like, our job wasn't, nobody wanted to shoot people.
Yeah.
We wanted to catch bad guys and put them in jail.
I think that's the misconception a lot of people have nowadays.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into a little bit more, especially some of your other cases that you want to, bring to light to the public. And we'll get into some more other interesting topics that me and you have talked about, like mental health and law enforcement. We'll take a quick break.
Okay.
And then we'll come right back and we'll get into that.
All right.
Awesome. This episode is brought to you by Grind Ops Coffee Company. Established in 2021, Grind Ops Coffee Company offers handcrafted, fluid bed roasted coffee to suit any tactical, outdoor, and or hectic lifestyle. It was founded on the principles of grit, grind, and perseverance. Their mission is to fuel your mindset for any op. Serving as a canine handler with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, founder Aaron Mesa drank coffee as a staple that fueled his day. As a natural-born tinkerer, he began experimenting with different roasting methods and flavor profiles. After lots of trial and error, Aaron had some damn good coffee. Aaron's dedication to Grind Ops Coffee Company mirrors the commitments he demonstrated to his country. Grind Ops Coffee Company helps support military and first responder nonprofit organizations. Law enforcement, officer owned and operated. Grind Ops Coffee Company. Go check them out today. grindopscoffeeco.com. Link will be in description. Check them out today. Well, it's much needed break. So we talked about your assassination attempt that, you stopped in your career so far. Let's go into a little bit more. I know you had a lot of overlapping cases that were huge.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on some of those?
Yeah. So our unit, so as you know, being former law enforcement, criminals never lie, right? They
No,
never lie about
they're
where they
honest people.
live.
You always had 2 beers.
Right. Well, when you're doing an investigation, people on their driver's license, and when they get arrested, they give you different addresses. So our job as detectives was, when we were investigating cases, try to track down where people live. So how do you do that? You do that with computer databases and traffic tickets. You do that with girlfriends and ex-wives coming to visit them in jail. So, and you also do that with a lot of surveillance. So a lot of the cases that we did, I've probably done, between the guys in our unit, thousands of hours of surveillance over a 10-year period of following people around. You know what I mean? I remember I rode on the metro all the way down into DC into PG County, which is the next county over. It was like a 3 or 4 hour mobile surveillance to try to put this guy into a home. Once we established a residence for them, we put that as probable cause and part of a search warrant. So I'm saying this now, I'm getting into another case, and I'm going to talk about straw purchases. I did a big straw purchase case where one of the gun stores called us that a lady was coming into a gun store, and they noticed a car sitting beside the gun store with some people in it, and something wasn't right. Something didn't fit with them right. And she wanted to buy a certain type of 45 caliber pistol, which is kind of odd for a female to buy a 45 caliber pistol. If you know anything about guns, 45s have a lot of kick.
Yeah, I don't like
have a lot
45.
of, I should say kick. The better word, they have a lot of recoil.
Yeah.
So during the course of the time where she applied to buy the gun, a male called the store and says, is my gun ready for pickup? I want to come pick up my 45. So I'm like, the gun store is like, man, something's not right about this. So they call us. So we find out that we set up surveillance on the store, and we let the transaction go through. Turns out this lady worked for NIH, and she was straw purchasing guns and selling them to people who are under 21 years old.
So can you elaborate for the listeners what NIH is?
National Institute of Health in Bethesda. Yeah. We actually followed her to the house where she took the gun to the underage people. It was a male and a female. And then there was multiple guns that were recovered. And she then got into the car and went and drove onto NIH property with a loaded firearm.
Which is
illegal.
Correct, because it's
federal property.
It's federal property, yes.
Yes.
And for the viewers, I want them to know NIH, like when you look up their thing, it's a .gov website. Like it's right. A government entity.
Yeah, it's a government entity. There's a big campus, and they do military research. They help veterans, and one of the main campuses was in Bethesda in Montgomery County.
Wow.
And it was probably a good 5-hour surveillance on her. And we finally arrested her, and I put her in handcuffs, and she cried her eyeballs out because I'm like, look, I followed you from the gun store. I saw you go to the house. I saw you armed with a gun. I saw you drop off the gun. Then I saw you go with another gun onto federal property with it. And she cried so hard because she knew she was finished.
She was done.
And she went to federal prison. And for the viewers who don't know, who have not done federal cases, so when you're taken in by the feds, you do every single day. There's no good behavior.
Mm.
So, and they don't put you in federal prison in your state. They send you across the country to be away from your family. But that was a huge case that made the unit pretty, you know what I mean? It was just put us on the map of, man, these guys are doing great things.
Yeah.
And, you know, we just basically, we could have prevented an armed robbery. You know, you don't know what these people were going to do with this gun.
Correct.
They obviously didn't have good intentions, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of straw purchases that happen here in the U.S. And they're not good. They don't lead to good things.
No.
And that's why the straw purchase laws are in place. Because people who are prohibited or convicted felons shouldn't have guns.
Correct. And I think that's something that, you know, for some of the viewers who are not aware, is like, it's not just the ATF. Like, the ATF is like the government version of, you know, going after firearms and stuff. And I'm sure they do some good cases, and I'm sure we all know they've done some that are not the greatest. And some of the rules that they're trying to implement and stuff, it's not really coming from a lot of their agents. It's coming from
from the government.
I've worked with
politicians.
I've worked with ATF agents. In fact, I worked with an ATF agent closely when I was with a contracting company. I won't say too much about the company, but we were dealing with a lot of explosives and firearms from foreign countries here in the United States, as we were getting them ready for, you know, certain events in the theater. And I never had a problem with these guys. Really good guys. Agents were cool. Sometimes we would shoot on the range with them. Like, really nice guys.
All the ATF agents I work with were super great.
Yeah, super good guys.
And the inspectors, we worked with a lot of the inspectors as well.
And it sucks because, you know, me and you have a mutual friend, Chris, Team Room Tactical, and he talks real great things about the agents he works with, because obviously he has to work closely with his firearms store and everything.
Sure.
And it sucks because we put this perception of, like, I mean, for example, there's some of these companies that make the t-shirts like ATF is gay and, you know, all that dumb stuff. And it sucks because you put some of these agents down, and really the guys who are out on the ground doing the job are actually some pretty squared away dudes.
Yeah.
But it's the government that gives them this bad perception of who these poor guys are.
Yeah,
and
100%.
And it really sucks, you know. But obviously not to go off on a rant on that. But so, you know, I mean, for most people, this case is like, you can go to some of these towns, and this case is huge. This is it. But it sounds like you had many, many, many cases like this, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was dozens.
Yeah.
Literally dozens. I mean, I remember sitting in a car with the ATF agents, and I think it was Loudoun County Sheriff's Office, and we were running a wire. I mean, the wire was running we were up on a wire with an informant buying illegal Sears.
Oh, wow.
You know, we did a search warrant up in Aberdeen, which basically is it's on the upper part of the Chesapeake Bay, on a guy who was he was in an outlaw motorcycle gang, and he was making grease guns, machine guns. Wow. So that was a case we did with the Maryland State Police.
And I guess before you go into that case, I wanted to elaborate on what I said, you know, a couple sentences back. It's not just the ATF out there doing things. It's like, you know, Montgomery County Police Department. Like, I'm sure here in Houston, there's a lot of local and state agencies that are they're combating gun violence and all that stuff. Whereas to, you know, have politicians making people believe otherwise.
So how do you stop gun violence from happening? That's a big question in the media right now.
It's huge.
You know what I mean? And it starts at home. It starts with having a father in the household.
Yeah.
That a lot of these, I would say, kids, like if you look at the crime in Chicago right now that's happening, they don't have fathers. So where's their role model? Where's their role model to be a good citizen?
Yeah.
They don't have that. So how do we fix that as a society?
Yeah.
That would be a conversation for a whole nother podcast.
Oh, I agree.
You know what I mean?
We can go on forever with that
We
one.
could go on forever. But everybody wants to blame the gun. Correct. Nobody wants to blame the individual.
Correct.
And that's a huge issue. That the guns aren't the problem.
No.
So everybody's like, we should take the guns away. Well, what do you think the government's going to do when they take your guns away and they take away your rights.
Nothing
good.
They're going to have their way with you.
Yeah.
We've seen this in the past in history, which people like to erase.
Yeah.
Mexico has gun laws. So does Brazil.
Yeah.
Some of the highest gun crime rates in the United States are in places that have some of the highest gun laws.
Correct.
And of course, they're only going to give you statistics that meet their criteria that makes it look good. For example, I lived in El Paso, Texas. I grew up in El Paso, Texas. You and I both had a conversation here, and I'm not going to mention where that conversation took place and what organization, but we both know the stuff that happens across the road from El Paso, Texas. Yeah. For the longest time, El Paso, Texas was rated the #1 safest city in the United States. Why? Because drug-related crime was not part of the statistic.
Right.
And what is most of the crime in El Paso, Texas?
Drug crimes.
Drug crimes.
Yeah.
So if you're not... So you can kill somebody based off of a drug deal, but it's not going to count because it's not drug-related. And that's what people don't understand is a lot of these statistics are botched, man.
Well, they're paid off.
Yeah. Especially when you have places like military towns, retirement towns and stuff. They don't want that stuff to make the media. I worked in a town in New Mexico that was arguably one of the craziest towns I've ever worked in and one of the most unsafest places in the United States. But it never really made the media. Why? It's a big retirement center.
Right.
You had companies going out there and, bringing retirees out and stuff and doing things, and you don't see that stuff. So, not to get off on that rant, because we can go forever. And I think, one thing I want to touch on before we go into a little bit more of your case studies and stuff. And in fact, I want to finish off with some of the more interesting cases that you've had. And then I kind of want to go into this gun talk a little bit, you know, and we won't go too deep into it.
I think it's important because of what's happening right now in the country, because of the border. And the misinformation. I think it's important because you have a vice president that's saying that she wants to take guns away.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a huge issue,
especially when we have national security threats like multiple terrorists in our backyard.
Yeah,
they're here already. They're here.
They are here. But gun crimes almost always overlap with certain other types of crimes.
Yeah.
So I was chit-chatting with you, and we were talking about the use of informants.
Yeah.
And some of the informants were paid. We were paying people to give us information. Some of them I signed up federally with federal agencies, and they were getting paid by the federal government to give us information to build a case. I had an informant that was giving me intelligence on ecstasy and firearms on somebody who was dealing e-pills.
Sounds fun.
Right? Cue the techno.
Yeah.
So he had information on a guy that was buying boats of ecstasy from the Russian mob.
Oh, wow.
And they were coming from Russia. Russian mobsters were making ecstasy. And ecstasy is basically chemicals that are put into a pill press. They would press them, and then they would ship them over on container ships into the port. Now, Baltimore is a huge port city. They would come in through New York City and Baltimore, and then they would go up and down the East Coast. But so I have this informant in my car. I was riding around, I think, with either a DC narcotics detective or an ATF agent. I can't remember because it all kind of blends together. But he takes me to this club two clubs in Washington, D.C. He's like, this is a spot where the pills go, where he goes to sell the pills. He says, Eddie, he says, there's a lot of young girls in this club. And I said, all right. I said, what do you mean? He's like, I'm telling you, there's a lot of young girls. There are underage girls that are in here that are under 18, young girls. And they're selling the pills. The girls are selling the pills. And he says, there's politicians that are going in here. There is judges that are going in here. He says there's lawyers going in here. He says there's a lot of powerful people in here with these young girls. And they're basically giving them ecstasy pills. And I'm sure other things were going on. I didn't put two and two together at the time. Fast forward, and I will tell you this quick story, and this is how it came to be. I had an intern on the police department who I'm still very close with today. I coached high school and college lacrosse because I played lacrosse in high school and in college. And he was my assistant coach. He was also a bouncer at a couple of the bars in Washington, D.C. And one of the bars that he was bouncing at was one of these bars that the informant said that the young girls would go into, and then they were selling drugs out of the bar. He did not know that at the time when he was bouncing there, and I didn't put two and two together until after I retired. So we struck up a conversation one day on the phone, and I was sending him some things reference to the Jeffrey Epstein case. And sure enough, one of the bars that he was bouncing at was affiliated with the Epstein case that started here in Florida and worked its way up to where it is today. So that was pretty interesting. You know what I mean? Like, that was like a wow moment. That, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I had an informant who was willing to give up very powerful people. And I didn't know this at the time. I was just doing an investigation. Come to find out that all of this was transpiring. And I'm sure, looking back at it, I'm like, I bet you these people were running kids out of these bars. You know?
Wow.
Now, knowing what I know now, I'm sure the girls were selling drugs and they were trafficking kids out of these bars.
I think I'm stuck for words right now.
Yeah,
Eddie,
I'm still stuck for words right now.
Because what you're saying to me right now goes back to a lot of my own theories and stuff that's going on with that case in particular. And when you have an informant telling you these things, somebody who's just obviously, you know, trying to keep himself out of trouble, but at the same time dropping the dime on other people.
And he was a reliable informant.
Yeah.
Like he gave us corroborated information, which led to multiple criminal arrests.
So, given his credibility, somebody's coming to the police and saying there's politicians in that place.
Yeah.
There's top ranking officials in that place. And they're getting ecstasy and there's young girls and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm honestly out of words for this one. I'm disgusted because what you just basically said right now gives so much validity to a lot of the hearsay that we've all heard, right? Of you know, I know when I tell people like some of these politicians are in on this sex trafficking and stuff, they look at me like I'm some crazy guy. But here you have a guy who's literally, you know, exposing these things to you guys. And it's crazy. It links back to a specific name, right? And I don't want to go too crazy on that name because I know that's a touchy subject and I enjoy breathing. I'm sure you do too, right? And I'm sure nothing we're saying right now is going to cause any trouble for us. But, you know, a lot of people that were involved in that case ended up missing, dead, you know, and there's a background to this case that we all know is high-ranking officials.
Yeah,
politicians deep into Washington,
and that's what he was telling me.
And there's
and I'm not going to mention the name of the bars.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to mention the name of the nightclubs. But I didn't put two. Like I said, I didn't put two and two together until after. And I'm like, we had a moment on the phone of silence with a buddy of mine, and we just both basically both said at the same time, "Holy shit!" You know, holy shit.
There's a man in Benghazi who lost his life because he knew a lot about this. Mm-hmm. And you and I talked a little bit about Benghazi. And everybody's like, you know, it was an inside job, or no, it was just a terrorist organization going after them and stuff like that. But that was a detail that was not known to be out there. There was inside information given by our government.
Absolutely.
To those animals. And the funny thing is we protect those animals today. There's a person, Superbad, Sarah Adams, who has exposed a lot of the Benghazi story out there. And there's a lot of gentlemen who survived that day. And they talk about it, and they talk about the corruption within our government. And it's disgusting to know that there was a politician in that compound that knew a little bit too much more than he probably needed to. And I'm not saying that you're saying this, but I'm saying it from my own side. He was taken out by our own people.
I think so. Well,
Yeah.
from
Allegedly.
from the Marsoc guys that I'm friends with,
Yeah.
that I've heard the stories about, you know what I mean?
I will not mention
I'm
his
not
name.
I'm not gonna talk about it on the air.
I definitely, because some of that stuff is still,
Well, some of it's still
there.
Right.
It's not meant to be put out in public yet, but I know a person in there, in that situation, who is, and I won't mention the organization or anything he was with, but he confirms a lot of the stuff we have these theories about.
Yeah.
And this person was also very close to be able to go help this ambassador. And I'm talking about not close as in like a couple hours close or anything. I'm talking about real close.
Sure.
You know, to be able to go save American lives. But we had Americans die. And I'm not going to go too detailed on that because obviously, you know, it's a touchy subject.
Yeah. I want to just mention that the corruption that you see and hear about today, law enforcement needs to stand up to this. Law enforcement has the power nationwide to stop this corruption, both at the local level, to the state level, and to the federal level. So any federal agents that are listening to this podcast, be brave, have the courage to come out to speak up against this corruption. It's not right.
I think we now have a platform too, where back in the days, media and internet and all that stuff was a little bit harder to obtain.
Sure.
Right? And I think in my story, for example, and it'll come out eventually, but I got ragdolled by corruption.
Yeah.
And, you know, at the time, Instagram, all that stuff wasn't huge.
No, there was, when I was on, you know, Facebook was first starting to come out.
Facebook, the thing, you know, and whether, you know, somebody gets the courage and the bravery to go up and stand against this corruption, it needs to be done. And if it's done, come clean. Let us all know. Put it out on social media. You know what? So if something does happen to you or something bad comes up of it, we all know. And that only gives it more validity to the story. But
100%.
We'll stand behind these people. I see, you know, and I'm going to say her name because, you know, it's out there already, but Sarah Adams. She's a CIA folk. She's worked with the CIA for a while, DOD. Part of some of the biggest ops in the CIA history with the global war on terrorism. Yeah. Catching, you know, the second in command with the Taliban, and that led to the Doha deal and everything. And this girl's coming clean. She's coming public.
And that's what people need to do nationwide.
Yeah.
Everybody from local police officers to detectives to people who are investigating fraudulent elections.
Yep.
All of it. You know what I mean?
Needs to come clean.
You
I agree.
Stand up for this country. Make this country great. Yeah. You know, and I think it's going to happen. You know what I mean? I think it will happen. Hopefully this podcast and others like it give these guys courage to stand up to this corruption and evil that's in our country.
I agree, Eddie. And I think, like I've told you, and we talked about it before filming this episode with our producer here in the studio, my goal for this podcast is not to sit here and look cool on camera and you know, talk about, you know, me and you getting drunk and doing all this cool stuff. No, I want to start putting these stories out. Yeah. Like I said, Sean Ryan's doing God's work, man. He's out there exposing people.
Amen.
He's bringing people to light and bringing stories to light that nobody was, you know, putting out there.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm Sean Ryan, but I'm Chris Moreno, and I want to put that stuff out there. Yeah. I want to join his fight, and I want to put these things out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, this is the reason why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this because I'm not making money off this. You know what I mean? I'm doing this because I want to put these stories out there. I want to put individuals like you, my last two guests, Chris and Hunter. You know, I want to put them out there and put those stories out there so people can actually see not what the media says or what politicians say, but the people that are actually doing the job.
People who did the job.
You know, Hunter Robichaud was in Ukraine, you know, helping set up communications lines and everything with the Ukrainians, and, you know, helping with all these different things. Chris was out there, fighting ISIS in Afghanistan alongside the Taliban for a moment in his deployment. Those are the kind of stories I want out there, not what so-and-so said from their office in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. You want to hear it from the grunts. You want to hear it from the people on the street.
The people actually
putting in the work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I'm still a little bit rocked from what you tell me about this other story about, the DC nightclubs and stuff. And because it just, I'm in that, see, I told you so kind of
I know,
mindset.
right?
And it's so flustering, man. And I know my wife and kids probably hear me sometimes like, this crazy bastard. But then when you get these I told you so moments, like, for my wife to agree with me some of this stuff, it's very rare, right? And recently she's been like, because she sees that I do my due diligence and I research things. And I don't want to just come out here and say, well, I saw this one meme on Facebook or Instagram and that's where I got my data from. No, I'm actually legit, looking into these things, getting credible, sources like yourself, other people that I'm not mentioning their names that me and you can mention, but that are giving us this data that we find out that's pretty fucked up for our country, But going into that, obviously we talked about, we can go into, corruption and, how bad our country is right now.
Still the greatest country in the world.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still damn proud to be an American.
Yeah.
You tell me where you're from anywhere else, I'll slap you in the face and tell you I'm from America because I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
And black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever the hell you are, I'm proud to be an American. I don't care. I'm not sitting here looking at race or any of that stuff.
Everybody's blood is red when they're cut.
Exactly. We all bleed the same blood. But I want to touch on another topic that I think you have really good knowledge for our listeners. And you were I'm not gonna say were because you're still here with us. You are because I don't like to say were. There's no such thing as X. You did the damn job and you've earned your stripes.
I earned the stripes and I was in the trenches, man.
Exactly.
I was in the trenches.
You retired and everything. And you're a person who took bad people to jail for, guns and, all that crazy stuff. You stopped an assassination attempt on our president, all these different things. What do you think, given that you were in a role where you took firearms away from bad people, what's your take on red flag laws in the United States today?
So that's a really great question. So I'll tell you what I did, and I will tell you what we did as a unit. And then I'll basically, after I explain to the audience what I did and what we did as a unit, I'll go into what I think about my personal opinion and professional opinion about red flag laws are. So I was a member of the crisis intervention team with the Montgomery County Police. So what is the crisis intervention team? The people who got certified as crisis intervention team officers basically were used and utilized to special work with the crisis center for mentally disturbed individuals who are suffering from a mental illness, right? So what's a mental illness? Anything in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual from the American Psychiatry Institute, schizophrenia, bipolar. Pretty much you name the list, you know what I mean? It was in there. And those are two basically disorders that I mentioned first because they were the most prominent. The PTSD, that was a big one. Yeah. I'll touch base on that now. So post-traumatic stress disorder. We've had a lot of cases. I've authored search warrants on veterans. They're basically combat veterans who came home from the global war on terror, who are overseas, that they didn't get the proper mental help they needed, and they just snapped. So what did they do? They shot up their house. You know what I mean? Took somebody's mother hostage inside the house, eventually let her go after a SWAT call out. Cranked off rounds inside of an apartment building. So what did we do? We got called out because we investigated them not only from a mental health standpoint, but from a firearms standpoint too, because they bought and purchased these firearms legally because they're not prohibited people.
Correct.
So during the course of them owning these firearms, they had a mental breakdown. Something happened. They now become a mental defective, right? Something happens, they snap, whatever that is. And each and every case is different. And I could go into hours on each case, but I'm just in the sake of time. I'm not going to do that today. But a lot of times there are combat veterans. A lot of them are actually Marines who have seen combat, seen a lot of dead people, blown up people, dead kids, and they can't take it. You know what I mean? And I don't know why, but the VA doesn't help them. You know, and that's a huge issue.
I think that is very interesting you say that, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I actually have recently finally got into the VA system, and yesterday was my first moment with my mental health, counselor, whatever you want to call it. He's a doc. I actually yelled at him because he tried to counter what I was trying to say with his own thoughts and his own personal beliefs of what he thinks I should feel.
Right.
When he has no direct, understanding of it. And I have to say this from a lot of vets that, like the VA system now and everything, a lot of them do complain about our mental health thing.
Yeah.
Because I want to point one thing out before we go any further into your stuff. I was a kid when I joined the military. I was a young boy. I was 17 years old and I joined the Marine Corps. I can't even buy a pack of cigarettes. I can't even buy a case of beer. But I'm expected to go overseas and fight a war.
And kill people.
Exactly. And when I come back, I still don't have those things.
Yeah.
And when you come back, all these young guys who came back, they weren't given, you're still a young kid. You're still learning how to live life. You don't even have much season other than high school drama to go back on. And you're expected to come back a normal human being. We still hold these guys accountable to these high standards. Yet when they come back, we don't give them the proper mental health treatment that they need.
I know.
And then we want to blame them and say that they're sick individuals.
Right.
But guess what? They were kids when they were taught how to kill people.
Yeah.
I was only 17, 18 years old when I was instructed on how to fire a firearm to kill somebody.
That's, if you step out of this and think about it, you're like, what? Something's broken.
Exactly.
It's
broken. And I'm going to tell you one thing right now from being in an experience where, I was in law enforcement, military, and private contracting as well. I hate to see that we fail those individuals with help that they need. And then we're quick to judge them and say that they're crazy, they're this, that, they're other things. When you have kids now flipping out because of gender and going to mental health doctors because of gender, and they're expected
it's called gender dysphoria.
And look, I get it. If that's their weakness, whatever, that's fine. But you're expecting to tell me that you're going to judge the hell out of a veteran or a law enforcement officer for any kind of PTSD events when you're getting offended by not being able to be a girl or a boy or whatever you want to be, or however many other genders there is. So you're seeking mental health. I don't know. There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. And when you see that people are judging these individuals, but then encouraging these other individuals to go get help, you're like, hold on, before you start judging folks. And I get it. If you're offended by gender or whatever, then that's on you. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say you're
sure,
whatever. That's your personal beliefs. But you have to understand, 17, 18-year-old, 19-year-old individuals were taking lives in the Middle East.
Thousands of them. Thousands, not
East.
Just hundreds. Thousands of you guys went over there.
And now you're expecting people to come back home and be completely normal citizens?
Right.
Come on now. There's no support for them.
No. And that's a huge issue. There needs to be a support network.
Yeah, I agree. And we can go more on that, and we will. But I want to hear more about your unit. Hey, guys. Do you live in Houston or the surrounding areas? Well, Clean Cut Lawn and Landscaping. Transform your outdoor space with Houston's premier landscaping experts. Call them today at 832-985-2287. Clean Cut Lawn and Landscaping offers a wide range of services to keep your yard looking the best, including full lawn service, shrub trimming, mulching, weed control, fertilizer programs, seasonal cleanups. At Clean Cut Lawn and Landscaping, they pride themselves on delivering top-notch services to maintain the beauty of your lawn all year long. Whether you need a regular maintenance or a one-time cleanup, their team of professionals is here to help. Why choose Clean Cut Lawn and Landscaping? They have expert care, they're reliable service, and they have affordable rates. Give your lawn the care it deserves with Clean Cut Lawn and Landscaping. If you live in the Houston area, call them 832-985-2287. Give them a call today to schedule your service.
So basically, when these things happened, I did a lot of these cases. So we would charge them with a crime. We would also not only charge them with a crime, in the state of Maryland, we would do what's called an emergency evaluation petition. So basically, you would have to be a doctor, a judge, or a police officer to write an emergency evaluation petition. So in the state of Florida, it's called a Baker Act. I don't know. Is there something similar here in Texas?
I don't know what they have here in Texas in play. I knew a little bit more of like New Mexico because at the time I was practicing being a police officer in New Mexico.
Right.
I think Texas has something like not similar, but there's something along the lines. You still can. Of course, people are like, "There's no law to it," but there still is a law.
So basically, we would take the firearms out of the house with a search warrant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Once the firearms were taken out of the house with a search warrant, they would get charged criminally for what they did. Most of the time, those charges would get dropped because of their mental health treatment. You know what I mean? They were diagnosed by a psychiatrist for having all these ailments, and basically the state's attorney's office would be like, look, he's getting mental health training, he doesn't have firearms anymore, you know. Our charges would get him help,
and not overall screw him over in the future unless he continued to
right.
Yeah.
So we would serve him with an emergency evaluation petition, explains what happened. They would get transported to the hospital for a mental evaluation, and they would hold him there until, you know, the guy talked and told him everything that had happened, and then they would put him in a program. So basically, us charging him and doing an emergency evaluation petition got them the help that they needed, which should have never come to that in the first place, because if they got the help that they needed over here, he wouldn't have shot up the apartment, you know what I mean?
Correct.
Or held his girlfriend or mother hostage with a gun.
Yeah.
So what we did after that. So when you buy a firearm, you do an ATF form 4473. It basically asks you a bunch of questions, and basically the gun store calls up NICS, which is called the National Instant Check Center. And they basically say yay or nay, you can buy a gun, you know, are you a convicted felon or prohibited person? So we would flag them through NICS after they've done this. So once you flag them through NICS, they're no longer able to buy a gun anywhere in the country, because anywhere in the country you go, their name would come up.
Going to pop up, yeah.
So basically now we have their guns in our possession, right? And then I'm going to touch base with red flag laws here in a minute. After all this was done, we gave them the opportunity to either give their guns to a family member, a friend, or they could sell them at any legal FFL that of their choice to recoup some of the money of the firearm, which a lot of police departments in the country are not doing. And that's what they should be doing. You know what I mean? Just because somebody they can't possess a gun anymore, doesn't mean they shouldn't be recouped for their money, because the police are basically seizing their property.
Correct.
You know, so our unit did that, and we were one of the first police departments in the country to start doing that, and they're still doing that today.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think,
you know, let's just face it, firearms are expensive.
They are. They are.
You know what I mean? So they may have not gotten back the full amount they've spent,
but they got some of it.
But they recouped some of that money. Yeah. Or they gave it to a family member, and we basically told the family member, and they signed an affidavit. And they're saying, look, you're going to be held criminally responsible for a transfer of a firearm to a convicted person if he comes in possession of this gun again. Yeah. So some of the family members were like, I don't want that responsibility. Some of them did, and they put them in a safe. You know what I mean? But I think that needs to happen nationwide if the police are going to take guns from, people who are adjudicated mental defectives.
You know, Ed, and I think for me, a lot of people like. I'm gonna be open and honest right now.
Yeah.
I don't like the NRA, and it's not because I think they're stupid or they no. I don't like the fact that there's too far on each side, right? And as much as I agree with some of the stuff that the NRA does, sometimes I'm like, guys, do we really need to fight about some of those things? Some of those extra things that they want to get legalized and stuff. I'm like, that's what gives the people fuel to talk shit about us, people who are pro Second Amendment.
Right.
And I'm not saying the NRA completely is bad, but I just don't agree with it completely, right? Some of the stuff, not everything. I am a strong believer in gun control, and I'm going to specify what I mean in gun control, right? Because I don't want to be like Tim Kennedy where they like threw the guy and ragdolled the shit out of him because he said he agrees with gun control. No. When I mean gun control, I don't mean about going and taking people's firearms and stuff like that. What I mean is like what you just said right now, having an implemented process that is going to be beneficial to everybody, right? So we require our kids to take driving school and all these driving lessons and stuff in order to get a driver's license, right? Which makes sense. You want to make sure they know how to operate a vehicle before operating a vehicle. I believe that, unless you have extensive firearm training, law enforcement, military, or, a job that trained you with firearms, if you're going to go own a firearm for the very first time, I'm a big believer that maybe we should implement some slight entry-level firearms course.
You need to be trained on how to manipulate and shoot a gun.
Show a checked 100%. Off, little card that says, hey, I've taken a precursor to, firearms training. And I say that because I trained some people. I've trained some people in my neighborhood, right? And some of these people have purchased a firearm for the very first time and they're not safe. And it's not because that's just who they are. They just don't know. They don't respect the firearm the way people like me and you do because we've trained with it. I've slept next to these things. I know how to respect them, and I know that they can hurt me at all times if I don't manipulate them the proper way, right? So not that they're going to hurt me, right? It's myself because, like we said, it's not the gun. It's the person behind the gun.
Right.
It's the operator behind that gun. And I have trained some people where I get flagged at the range. So I'm like, whoa. So I'm trying to break those habits and I teach them these things. So I do agree that if people, I encourage people to have guns. I want everyone to have guns. They're important. Like you said, it protects us not only from a foreign invasion, but it also protects us from an internal threat. And when your government doesn't want you to have guns, there's a reason.
Yeah.
Look at how many countries that don't have guns. Mexico being one. That government runs the hell out of those people.
Well, look what's happening in the UK right now.
Exactly. Look at Venezuela. Look at Brazil. Look at all those places, right? So I agree that we should all have guns, but I also agree that, people who are coming into it, maybe a small evaluation prior to getting a firearm. And then that gives us a little bit of a more sense of security. When you look at statistics, most law-abiding citizens are not the ones out there shooting people up and everything, right?
No, of course not.
No. Chicago has huge gun laws.
What's the violent crime rate up to now?
It's insane. There's what do they call it? Chirac for a reason. There's people getting killed every day. And it's not by a guy who went and bought a gun lawfully at the store. They got it illegally. Illegal arms are going to be everywhere.
I'm wondering, now that you said that, it'd be interesting to know, and I don't know the answer to this, where those guns are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
How they're getting them.
Yeah. But that doesn't matter right now. That's not part of the agenda. It sucks, right? It sucks that, you got politicians getting into certain, individuals' head, making them believe something, but they don't want to hear the other side. And then when people like me and you start talking about it, they call us racist. They call us, evil, right. Supremacists and stuff. One, I'm not white. I'm Hispanic. So I'm not a white supremacist.
Could I be not white because I'm Polish?
I mean, maybe no, but you're still a little too bright, so you're racist.
Oh,
you know what I mean? It's ridiculous, right? It is ridiculous. Just because you don't agree with them, you literally worked in a profession where you were taking firearms from individuals. So if anybody's going to sit there and you agree with us owning firearms,
100%.
So then, I guarantee you bring one of those individuals that wants to take our firearms away, and you put them in front of you. What's their argument with you now? They're not going to like you because
they're going to talk about all the school shootings.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
When arguably some of those have been, I mean, like, you know, me and you talked about it earlier. I've been involved in an active shooter situation when I was a police officer. And me and you talked about, you know, like, for example, the Uvalde one. That was a failure on law enforcement's end, right? 100%. That was also a failure on law enforcement's end because this kid had already been flagged about some of the stuff he was doing, right?
So if they flagged him, why didn't they take his guns away?
Correct. Like you just said, what your department was doing. That's awesome, man. That's one of the first departments I've really heard of a process like that. That's amazing because it gives that opportunity to actually go after these individuals. These new red flag laws that some of these politicians are pushing, they don't give you that opportunity like you just explained. It's like all or none.
Right.
And that's not right.
And it goes to a point of red flag law is basically, I don't like my neighbor. I think he is a white supremacist, and I saw him with a gun the other day.
Well, think about it now. We have such division in our nation where if we're voting for a specific candidate, we don't like each other.
Yeah.
So
that's
basically
actually happening.
Yeah.
All over the country.
If you tell me right now you're voting for Trump and I tell you I'm voting for Kamala and I know you have guns, I go call the police right now in some of these states that are trying to implement these red flag laws because I was mad at you. Now I'm going to have...
And then they lie to the dispatcher over the phone.
And then say that this person's armed and dangerous and potentially getting in a shootout with you. They show up in a heightened response, you know, probably unmarked and stuff. Now you think somebody's kind of trying to steal stuff from your house or whatnot. You try to defend yourself and you end up probably dead if you don't go to jail.
That's actually happened.
It's happened. The ATF had a situation like that. So
just basically what I will tell the law enforcement viewers is that when something comes up and somebody gives you information, you need to corroborate this information.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Just like when we were in DEA undercover school, you know, when use of informants, somebody's going to tell you this person's at this time, he sells drugs. Well, how do you know that? Well, here's his tag number. And if you don't give the information and corroborate this information, how do we even know it's reliable? You know what I mean? Because people say things all the time.
Exactly.
People are jealous. People are angry.
Yeah.
And if they're going to say things that aren't true, now the police department is going to respond to untrue information. Number one, it puts the police department's officers in extreme dangerous situation. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Which they don't need to be in.
And now potentially an innocent civilian in danger. An innocent
civilian may end up losing their life or getting arrested for something they never did. And number three, it opens up the department for a huge lawsuit.
Yeah.
Because if any of those things happen, that person's gonna get paid.
And I hope the viewers that are listening that don't even have law enforcement, or even them, the guys who are in law enforcement who are still kind of confused about these things or anything, I hope they take these words and take them seriously, because a person like you who had a very, very decorated career as a detective, taking away firearms from people who didn't need to have them and investigating big cases, like, these are the people we need to start standing up to come out and start talking about these things.
Yeah.
Not politicians who have no clue.
The politicians have absolutely no clue. That the whole term, I will say this, the whole term assault rifle doesn't exist. They're just rifles.
Yeah.
You pull the trigger one time and one bullet comes out.
You know, and exactly. I don't know where I'm going to tell you one thing right now. I don't care for automatic weapons. It's just a waste of bullets for me. I'd rather take precise shots.
Well,
right? They're fun.
Right. They have their use in a military application for suppressive fire on a position.
Correct. But I don't need it. I mean, me personally, I don't need it. I'm not saying people shouldn't have them, right? What I'm saying is I don't care. I've shot plenty of them in my military career.
Sure. I've shot plenty of machine guns.
It's like, cool. You know, I'm more of a like, oh, let's waste. I
got $30.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, like let's not waste all that money, you know. So, but what I think people need to understand is, I'm going to bring a personal story real quick. I grew up in El Paso, Texas. Mm-hmm. There's a specific politician who's made national fame from El Paso, Texas, who said he was going to take away our firearms. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I know who it is, and I've heard of it. I just don't remember his name.
Beto O'Rourke.
Beto O'Rourke, yes.
Robert O'Rourke. Beto, because he grew up in El Paso. I guess everybody wanted to push the whole Hispanic thing on him. He's a Caucasian male. You know how many times I've gone to what's called the Rod and Gun Club in El Paso, Texas, right outside of Fort Bliss, Texas, and shot my firearms there. And I saw Beto O'Rourke shooting AR-15s there.
Funny how that works out, huh?
It's crazy, though. I'm sure he'll deny it now. But and I'm not going to sit here and say it's a lie because we all seen it on TV where he said, I'm taking your damn ARs.
Yeah. Why would he say that?
Yeah. Because you know why? He fell to become a puppet of the Democratic Party. A lot of these guys don't believe that stuff. Joe Biden, man. As a matter of fact, Joe Biden, before he became who he is now, I feel bad for the guy. He's old and demented. I feel bad for him. And I'm not going to get into his story, but that guy, even before all these, political views that he has now, supposedly or whatever, he was somewhat of a slightly conservative individual.
On some issues, yes.
On some issues he was. He believed in firearms. He didn't care about, he cared about them. But then you have this, it becomes this agenda to be part of the party that, it's almost like, it sucks, man. It's like Bloods versus Crips, man. Like, you either, you live by the way that they believe. If not, you're not part of them. And the only way to become successful as a human being in politics is you have to believe they're crap and act like you enforce the rules that they want to be enforced. It's all an agenda.
And guess these politicians who are making these tyrannical laws,
yeah,
guess who they're guarded by?
By
guys
people with
machine
guns. Yeah.
Not only guns, machine guns.
Yeah. More than machine guns. There's some other stuff they got too.
Right.
You know what I mean? But isn't that crazy? It's wild to know that, because I'm sure Beto O'Rourke wants guys in his detail with AR-15s.
Of course he does.
Of course he does. Right? But now we can't defend ourselves. But then they say, oh, it's because you got to defend yourselves from, direct threats that can potentially cause harm. Well, guess what? That's the same thing for American citizens.
Well, the government is the one causing the harm.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just let 11 million people into this country who are unvetted.
Unvetted people, unvetted individuals. What's crazy is we had a vetting system in the military that they used in Afghanistan. And
isn't that biometrics?
Yeah, biometrics. Yeah. And I just want to throw this out there because
U.S. Marshals sometimes use that system.
I want people to know what's going on in Afghanistan real quick. The biometric system, when we did this Doha deal and we removed from Afghanistan, instead of destroying the biometric system, we turned it over to the Taliban. So now every single vetted Afghan national who worked for the United States government, who was vetted by biometrics,
they were in that system.
They're in that system, and now the Taliban knows exactly who they need to go for. You ever watch World War II movies where the Nazis were like looking up names and stuff like that? But now can you imagine with a click of a computer, man? You can now find out that so-and-so was working with the United States government at what capacity. He was an interpreter. He was, a chow hall, whatever. He worked for the U.S. government. Do you think the Taliban wants those people? Of course not. What do you think? What are they doing to them, Eddie? Are they putting them in jail? Of course not.
They're killing them.
They're killing them. And guess who did that? We as Americans, and I'm embarrassed to say so, we've allowed a terrorist organization to take charge of these people.
It's sad.
The Haqqani network
comes back to the corruption.
Exactly. The Haqqani network, for example. The guy is one of the top wanted persons on the FBI list. And he's actually now in charge of handing out passports in Afghanistan.
Unreal, right?
He also he was the mastermind behind suicide vests. But when I say these things, people think I'm crazy. It's simple. Just look it up on the FBI website. You'll find this information.
You'll see everything.
Exactly. But
it's funny. I used to work security at America's Most Wanted.
Yeah.
And I used to see all the wanted posters from the U.S. Marshals and the FBI. And if you actually sit there and read what these guys do, it's mind blowing.
It is. It's wild, right?
And what do they always say? Truth is better than fiction.
But yet we want these people to, some of us, I'm not saying some of us as in me and you, but some of the United States citizens want these people to make decisions for us when it comes to red flag gun laws and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I do, touching base on what you were saying. Yeah. So now we have, is it up to 27 states that are constitutional carry?
Yeah, I think it's 27.
So how I feel about constitutional carry, I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. Everybody should be carrying a gun. You walk into I'll walk into a bar or a restaurant in the state of Florida, and I'll look at people's waistbands, and people are carrying guns everywhere. You know what I mean? Yep.
It's crazy that they're not shooting each other.
And they're not shooting each other. They're all partying, having a good time,
Yeah.
eating grouper, and
And I get it. Too much alcohol on a gun, probably not a good idea. But
what you were talking about earlier. So in Florida, they still have a carry and conceal permit, which I have in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
So I also have a LEOSA certification, so I can carry a firearm. I have to qualify every year, and I can carry a firearm in the continental United States, all 50 states. So as a law enforcement officer, you can do that. So I do think that if people are going to get a carry and conceal permit, well, in Florida, they make them go through training. But I do think that people who are going to carry a gun or a pistol around, you need to have some sort of training, A, about use of force, and B, how to manipulate and load and unload the firearm, just basic skills. And I'm talking about citizens now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you need to go to the range and shoot it. Do I think there should be laws mandating that? No, I'm just saying it's a good idea for you as a citizen to do that.
Yeah. To
have that knowledge. So if you're going to carry this, you need to have the knowledge of how and when to use it.
Yeah.
You need to be educated.
You know, there's a state I used to live in, New Mexico. The governor currently, he's anti-gun, and she not too long ago came out saying she was going to take away guns in Albuquerque and stuff. And the DA even came out and said, like, whoa, like, we don't want part of this.
It's amazing that people are still even in office.
CNN actually called her out. CNN, I forget her name on CNN, literally said, Governor, you just said you're going to violate Second Amendment rights. And she kind of gave her that look, almost like, aren't you CNN? Shouldn't you agree with me? But even they know, like, you don't do that. Right. But in that state, interesting enough, I can't do that here in Texas. I think I get a discount. But as a veteran in the state of New Mexico, I submitted my paperwork as a veteran. Mm-hmm. I don't even know exactly if I had to submit any of my firearms calls or not, but I got a concealed handgun license like nothing sent to me.
Yeah, usually they don't even ask. Like when I moved from Maryland to Florida, I showed them my creds.
Yeah.
And
good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I get it. You got that credibility behind it and everything. It's understandable. Well, right. But it's funny how that's what the state believes, but then she's trying to take away firearms and stuff from people. You know, because the bad guys aren't going to give up their guns.
Never.
They're not going to give up their guns.
Never. So
now who has the guns? They do. We don't. Right. So, yeah, I think that's I'm kind of glad we touched on that red flag thing, because I think not a lot of people like to touch on that because it's very my way or the other way, right? Nobody really likes to talk about the middle of it.
Yeah. And, active protective orders and domestic violence protective orders, the sheriff's office actually do a good job, at least in the state of Florida. I know in Maryland they did, about vetting people, because if somebody comes in and says, hey, this person, it was a lot of spouses or ex-spouses. That's a lot of it, at least where I'm from it was. He threatened me and he said this.
Yeah.
Okay. Fill out this affidavit. Now this is a legal affidavit. So now if you lie, the deputies told them, if you lie about this, we're going to charge you with filing a false police report.
You'll find somebody lying quick there.
So a lot of the bullshit stopped. You know what I mean? The really true people who actually had that happen to, they would fill out the affidavit and then they would, continue writing on another 3 pages. And, it was a legitimate case.
Yeah.
But once the sheriff's office started doing that and basically made it an official affidavit, like a police report. Yeah. So basically, if you're going to lie on this, we're going to charge you with a crime. And they would tell them that. Then it would stop. And that's what needs to happen throughout the country.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree with that.
You can't just go around and accuse people of doing something and then say, the police department's going to go after them because this person, quote unquote, threatened me.
Correct.
You can threaten anyone you want. That doesn't mean that you're going to actually do it. You know what I mean? Like if I say, dude, you need to stop doing that, I'm going to beat your ass.
Yeah.
Now are you going to go say that I threatened you with a gun?
So do you think that I think red flag laws are understandable to a certain extent depending on what the actual law is, right?
Well, and
Like,
they're different from
yeah.
state to state, and that's a problem.
Kind of like you said right now with how you guys did it up in Maryland, right? Where, you looked into it.
Yeah, we corroborated all
yeah,
the facts,
yeah,
interviewed people, witnesses, and a lot of the things. Like, I'll give you another example of a case. My old corporal was with me in Lincoln Park. He had actually got a promotion, and he was a motor, right? So he was working, and he actually got a death threat letter dropped off at the station to him by a Chinese guy, actually. And so we started looking into this, and he made threats to kill police officers. And we ended up getting a search warrant for the house. Our repeat offenders section, set up surveillance on the house, and they actually did a takedown and almost wrecked all of their cars because he played bowling with the cars to try to get away. Yeah. And we found a bunch of guns in the house, and he was a schizophrenic. And so, we did an emergency petition on him. We charged him with assault and everything else. Took the guns out of the house, but things like that actually do happen.
yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of people out here that have firearms that actually develop a mental illness while they're in possession of a gun.
So, not that I want to get away from the gun stuff and everything, but mental health in its own, right? Because when you look at some of these complaints, it's like, oh, veterans, law enforcement guys with guns, and people get scared about that and everything. I personally think that we're underserviced, especially when it comes to law enforcement with mental health. Because, I'm not saying that in the military, mental health, we have it figured out, but it's I think it's overwhelmed, the system, right?
The system is definitely overwhelmed.
Mental health in America is not taken serious. There's other things like, cardiology and stuff that are more important to a lot of these doctors.
Yeah.
I get it.
Because they're not getting paid on the back end.
Exactly. And mental health is underserviced in the United States. And when I say underserviced, just to even get a marriage counseling, you got to wait for months, from a decent, entity. And it's sad, but yet we want to blame other things, but we're not going to the root of the problem, which is mental health, right? And being a prior law enforcement officer, and I told you this today, I was so deep in a state at one point in my life where I almost took my own life. I didn't have anybody. I didn't have anything. Yeah, you have friends and family and stuff like that, but there's not, and I'm not going to say there's not any, because my last guest, one of them, Hunter Robichaux, they have the Mighty Oaks Foundation. Not only services veterans, but it serves law enforcement as well, spouses as well, because they go through this hell. I told you this earlier. I had a call one time where I saw an infant dead on my shift. I was on overtime, and I went and saw an infant dead on my shift. And then right after, I get a call to a lady who's upset because her neighbor keeps parking their car on their side of the street, which is legal. It was legal, and that, there was no illegal parking being done. And then the lady complained on me because she said my demeanor and my attitude was, but we're expected to drop these things. Most citizens would not put up with the fact that they just saw a 2-year-old child lifeless with his intestines sticking out of his stomach and brain matter.
They would lose their minds.
They would lose their minds. And I'm sure people listening to this right now are like, whoa.
I'll tell you a story after you're done.
And
a couple of stories.
And when you look at that, we judge a lot of our officers and say that, they're mentally unstable, this, that, the other, but where have we tried to help our officers?
Well, that's what needs to happen.
Exactly.
And maybe not establishing an outside program, but maybe establishing a program within the police department with other officers so they can talk about critical incidents.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Some of the things that I've seen,
Yeah, you've had plenty of time behind the badge.
Easter Sunday, I got dispatched to a shooting that I was a backup on when I was in Lincoln Park. Easter Sunday, so I get to the scene. There was a lady laying in the gutter in front of a single-family house in Wheaton, and she had a gunshot through her breast and through on her forearm, bleeding, blood everywhere, just gasping for air. The rescue squad actually gets there just a hair before us. So the 2 officers go into the house with their guns drawn, and I'll tell you what happens after. And they secure the scene. I ride in the ambulance with this lady. She dies in the ambulance. I'm pumping her on her with CPR while the paramedics are, manipulating and running IVs and everything, and ended up saving her life with CPR. If we get to the hospital in the trauma center, now this is probably early evening. Put a robe on. I have an evidence bag. They crack open her chest in the middle of the emergency room. Her heart's beating, her guts are falling out, and they're picking out bullet fragments out of her chest and putting them in this evidence bag. So I'm like, holy shit, dude, this is crazy, So it gets better. Homicide picks me up at the hospital and takes me back to the scene. I said, what happened? He said, this was a murder-suicide. I said, holy shit. I said, here's the evidence. That lady actually lived. She lived.
Wow.
Through all that. Go into the house. The son, mental health, he was schizophrenic, shot his dad in his chest in a back bedroom. The bullet went into his aorta and hit him in the top of his aorta.
Took him out.
He had a hole in his chest. And because of the pressure in the heart, blood was spurting out all over the walls. It looked like somebody took a bucket of blood and just went like this all over the walls of the house.
Yeah. Shot him right through the pump.
Yeah. And then he fell down in a pool of blood probably 3 inches high in the back bedroom. His son took a .357 revolver and shot himself in the head in his mouth, and the bullet never exited his brain, so his head looked extended like an alien.
Yeah.
The movie Alien, with a hole with brain matter leaking out on the floor. I mean, he literally, it was on top of a glass table. It was like something out of a movie. And I'm just like sitting there. I'm like, and Easter Sunday for me has never been the same.
No, it won't be.
And I still remember that to this day, clear as day, and making death notifications of people's kids who died, seeing dead kids with their ribs sticking out of them who were green, who got run over by cars, shooting victims, people who've been stabbed in the face, car accidents. This lady got crushed and hit a bus head on, and the dashboard crushed her legs, and both her femurs popped out of her legs like this, straight up in the air. Yep. Just some of the stuff that I've seen makes Freddy Krueger movies look tame.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a murder person or victim, and he was hit with an axe in his neck multiple times, and he had one little piece of flesh still kind of holding his head onto his torso, but everything, including top of his spine, his neck, everything was just severed through with an axe. We saw the axe marks in the concrete. Wow. In the ground, and I get there and just expected to go back onto my normal calls and stuff.
Yeah,
afterwards.
You're just never the same after seeing this.
You're not, and you
changes
get it.
Your view on life.
You become immune to it for a moment.
My wife says I'm callous.
Yeah, but then eventually it comes out a little bit.
Yeah,
where it's not normal. You're not expected to see these things, and I've recently told my wife that I have a lot of demons stuck inside of me because of the things I've seen.
Yeah,
and especially for me at a young age, I was still a kid. Even in my young 20s, I was still a young kid, man. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Most of my friends were still living at their parents' house going to college. I was seeing dead people. Now I work in healthcare, and I worked on the back end of it, working in a trauma facility at a time being, seeing these people coming in from the streets. And I feel like that bothered me more because a lot of people in the healthcare field, they see how these people look coming in from the streets and stuff and all jacked up and everything.
Yeah.
But I know what it's like to go pick them up on the streets or to go find them on the streets.
It's a little bit different.
It's different.
When you're seeing them laying there in agony and pain and the hospital and the nurses and doctors are working on them.
Correct.
They just have a different view. And I'm not saying what they're doing is any less significant.
No,
because
but
it's not.
But when you get to visit both worlds, it really fucks with your head. I remember holding a teenager who he had a whole life ahead of him, who got shot in the forehead right here, and he was, at the time I didn't understand medical stuff and I didn't understand anything, but he was still talking to me, telling me that he wanted me to save his life.
That's hard.
And then he started mumbling and stuttering, and his hands started going out like he was knocked out. I didn't understand anything at that time, the whole posturing and everything. But now, having a medical background, his brain was starting to swell. His brain was filling up with blood. He was starting to have, neural deficits. Yeah. He was starting to go into some terrible shock and everything. And he died in our arms.
That's tough, And
it is tough, And we don't support our guys and girls doing this job. Instead, we go on the media and we want to take funding away from them. We want to destroy them. We want to belittle them. We want to judge them, given there has been some unjustified stuff by law enforcement. But how much other things that we don't talk about?
Things.
The good
the
things.
Media
we don't
doesn't cover all the good things.
We talk about one bad thing for every 100, 200 good things.
Yeah, because it doesn't sell.
Exactly. And isn't that the shitty part? Is that we live in a society where, even me, just to get clips and views for this podcast, I have to get the crispy parts of this story so that we can get people to follow the podcast.
That's pretty sad.
Isn't it sad?
Yeah.
When we all should be just listening to these things and actually educating ourselves. It's crazy, man.
Well, I think that's moving forward. I think law enforcement nationwide, they need to up the hiring standards. They need to up the educational standards back to where they were. Yeah. You know what I mean? Everybody that I worked with, minimum had a 4-year degree. Yeah. A lot of people have master's degrees. Yeah. We had guys on our department with law degrees.
Yeah. And equal opportunity and stuff is a thing. I get it. But in some professions, it does not need to be there. And we saw that the other day on national TV when you have guns flying out of somebody's holster.
Yeah, that should have never happened.
That should have never happened.
And, we were touching base on training. Every department nationwide trains their officers differently. So maybe this is something that we could talk about or touch base on. What if there was a national training standard to train all police officers a certain way nationwide?
I agree. I have a future guest really good guy. I talked to him. He's prior law enforcement. He does his own training now. He has his own company. And really, really good points he puts out there. And he puts some statements out there that have even bothered me at times, because it makes you realize, like, oh shit, some of the stuff has made me a little upset, but I'm like, damn, he's not wrong. And when he talks about these things, he calls out a lot of the things, how departments are huge on like wiping officers' names out in public and, screwing them over, and admin, right? Admin is quick to judge the hell out of you.
But most of the guys in admin have never really even done the job to begin with.
Correct. They're those Main Street warriors, like I tell you, right?
Yeah.
And they don't understand what the guys are doing on the back end, and they put them on the burner right away. But there's never any process implemented. Like physical fitness in law enforcement should be a thing. I was one to believe that obviously my physical fitness isn't the greatest anymore, but I still can hold my own, sure. Right? And I was a big believer in having a squared away uniform. That doesn't obviously make a cop, but being squared away, having somewhat of decent physical fitness, sometimes that deters criminals from wanting to fuck with you.
Yeah, because they look at you. If your uniform is sharp, your gig line's straight.
There's actually a study where a lot of criminals have said, I attacked that officer. Why? Because he looked like shit.
Yeah.
He looked like the guy that I can get away with.
They thought they could overwhelm and kill him.
Exactly. When you look at that squared away guy, you're like, oh, this guy might know a thing or two. And some people might think that's stupid, but it's true. I'm a big believer in it. And he points these things out where standards should be higher for law enforcement officers. Shooting standards. How many police officers do you know that didn't pull out their guns unless it was like a crazy town or whatever, but didn't really pull out their firearms and qualify with them unless it was qualification time with their department? A lot. That's one of your tools.
I enjoyed going to the range.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I enjoyed training. I enjoyed getting all this.
It's what might keep you alive and might take you home one day.
Yeah.
Why would you not care to use it?
Right.
Do you think...
and all that training, it didn't go away. It's still up here.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
I mean, I went away from it for a long time because I was in a deep phase, right? I was in a deep phase in my life. But I recently got back into the community. I recently started shooting again and utilizing my guns and everything. And look, it's like riding a bike. I was a little rusty at first, but I'm right back at it.
Yeah.
I'm drawing from the holster. I'm hitting my targets the way I need to in a short period of time and everything because it stays in there. And that's why I think training is important for people who have never used a firearm. Because the more you train and the more you adapt to this world, it becomes easier and safer. Right,
That is true.
I'm a big believer in
safer
safe.
is
the
key
big
word.
thing.
Because the more you train, the safer you're going to be.
Exactly, because you know what you can do if you make a mistake. But also don't get complacent, right? Because complacency hurts you too.
Complacency kills.
Yep. So that's my take on that stuff, and I think mental health is a big thing that we also need to invest on. Instead of defunding police, why don't we fund them a little bit more with mental health?
Yeah, I agree.
Why don't we help them out? These guys are can you imagine?
And the military guys who have served our country.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They need support.
They do. They supported us. Why not? Why can't we support them?
Yeah. And maybe that funding doesn't come from the federal government. Maybe it comes from state governments. Maybe it comes from people like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Maybe it comes from rich billionaires. You know what I mean? That support the police and want to create programs for people like you and I and others out here that are listening to this podcast to just help them.
Yeah, I agree. We fund, drug programs and stuff. Why can't we fund like needle swap out programs and stuff? Why can't we fund some kind of help for the people that are helping us? The people that you and I are going to call at night when something goes south at our house. Well, I might not call them until later, but
right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like some people
getting on social media and seeing all these body cam videos. A lot of these body cam videos, people out here are quick to judge.
Well, you only get 10, 15 seconds of it.
Right.
Of a 6-hour possibly event.
Right. And they sit back here and they armchair quarterback, and I've been guilty of it too. You know.
Oh, yeah, we all have.
So what I think should happen professionally is that all the judges, all the state's attorneys, all the U.S. attorneys need to go through use of force training with the police department, either at the federal level or the state level. Spend a day shooting, spend a day doing scenarios so they understand what American law enforcement does.
Somebody did that actually with a politician who was a politician or a media guy. I don't remember, but he was very anti-law enforcement, guns, and all this crazy stuff. It changed his views 100%.
I saw that too.
Yeah, they put him through
California.
They put him in a sim house, and they showed, and then he shot the victim multiple times, and then he was like, oh, they were like, see,
yeah. I think that should be if you're gonna prosecute cases,
you should at least understand them.
You should at least understand them. You should understand the use of force continuum.
I think that's a good idea.
You know what I mean? I think that would benefit this whole country.
I think so too.
You know, and if you guys, the citizens out here now, there's a lot of guys out here, and I'm going to mention some of them here on the podcast that are offering training to both law enforcement and military and civilians. You know what I mean? A buddy of mine, Bravo Tactical, has out in Arizona opened up this beautiful training center for civilians and law enforcement. Barrel and Hatchet in Florida. Apex Training Solutions in Florida.
Yeah,
they're great. They're Marines.
Yeah.
You know, Critical Training Solutions.
I'm actually going to probably be taking one of their courses soon.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Cool guys.
Let me know if you go. I'll meet you up there.
Yeah.
Critical Training Solutions. Alpha Foxtrot Tactical. He's in Sarasota.
Yeah.
I mentioned Barrel and Hatchet. And if you guys want to find training, because a lot of YouTube and Facebook and Instagram are censoring all of us in the community, you go to Tac Skills, and he has a list of training venues throughout the country. Valhalla Firearms Training out in the Pacific Northwest. He's a Green Beret, and he's training civilians how to shoot and how to handle these weapons properly.
You know, one training thing
And there's others.
formats.
These are
Yeah.
just, guys that I know personally.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And it needs to be put out there. For example, one of the guys that I reached out to them, and they're cool dudes, and I talk to them every now and then. It's the dudes from GBRS group, right?
Yeah, I heard of them.
DJ Shipley and Cole, and all those guys. They some people hate them, and it's always gonna be hate. If you're not hated, you're not doing something right, right?
Exactly.
And I like that their training program that they have, their knowledge transfer course that they have, their KTC courses. Not only are they teaching you firearms and safety and all that stuff, they're having chow with you. They're eating.
Yeah. That's the way it should be.
They're having afternoon classes after this is all set in stone, and mental health shit. Getting together and actually, you got to train this guy up here too. Right?
Train your brain.
Yeah. And I
mental
think
toughness.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. You have other guys that are, I was a Navy SEAL, so I have this training corps. I was a Green Beret, I was a Marine, and they're doing all kinds of dumb bullshit just to make money, and I get it, whatever. But there's a lot of organizations, just like the ones you said right now, that are out there that they want to help.
They want to help.
Yeah.
They want to make people better. They want to make citizens better.
Yeah.
They want to make citizens and police safer.
So I didn't want to touch on this
Yeah.
on any of my podcasts,
Yeah.
but I'm actually about to do it now because we just talked about it. There is a law, and I can't quote it right now because I don't have the actual statute or whatever the hell it is.
Uh-huh.
But they are actually trying to pass a law to where companies like that and organizations like that, it's illegal to train people tactics and firearms and stuff.
Why
like
do you
that.
think they want to do that, audience?
And I'm gonna leave it there.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say anything else. But
Right.
why the hell do you think they don't want us to teach each other these things?
Exactly.
There's fear somewhere. No one's trying to overthrow the government or anything. Like his face, I like firearms and stuff. I'm not trying to go over there and overthrow Washington or any of that stuff. I just want to.
That would be pretty hard to do.
Yeah, it would be very hard to do.
Considering
But
what the Secret Service has on the White House.
Exactly. But what I want is I want to protect mine and my family.
Right.
That's all I want.
And that's what everybody should be doing.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
But there's a reason.
There is a reason.
Eddie, it's an honor to have you on here, man.
Thank
it really
you.
Is.
I appreciate it.
I really am. I'm honored to have you on here, and I want you to know that I hope the viewers take these stories and actually listen to them and go find other stories like yours and see that this stuff is an everyday lifestyle thing. There's corruption. There's crazy stories. I mean, a lot of your stories, I'm sure some of the viewers are going to be like, whoa, that happened? Yeah, a lot of shit happens that doesn't make the media.
Right. And some of their stories that are still in that I didn't talk about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We could talk for another 6 hours.
Yeah.
I mean,
we can go all day with this,
right.
And
And if any of the viewers, we'll give my social media link on Instagram.
Yeah.
If any of you guys ever want to contact me about anything, send me a message.
So
I'll give you my cell phone, not in a private message. I will.
Yeah.
Hit me up,
And I think it's kind of something I have pushed onto, and I have followers on Instagram now that they reach out to me personally and we chat about things and stuff. They ask me questions and everything. And I don't want anybody to think that just because I have the little blue check mark on the side of my Instagram means I'm too cool for you or anything. Like, no, man.
I don't have any check marks.
Yeah,
on mine.
I want to be. You're in trouble with Instagram. I want to make sure that people know that we're out here. Our community truly wants to support one another, and also teach people who are not familiar with our community some of the importances. And
education is
exactly
beneficial to everybody.
Exactly. And another thing I wanted to touch on is you had this remarkable career as a detective, police officer, stand up American, man. Like, you're out there doing good things for our country, both at the city and the state level, all the way up to the federal level, helping us out, helping the feds out with big cases and everything. What are you doing now, Eddie?
So basically, I was injured.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I have a lot of injuries from... Well, both of my hips need to be replaced right now. What really did me in is I wrote a search warrant for a house, and during the execution of the search warrant, I tore my biceps tendon off my bone in my shoulder, and I tore my labrum in my shoulder. I had it surgically repaired, and it never has been the same since. So that, coupled with all of my other injuries that I received from being on the job, they're all documented. I retired, you know what I mean? So right now I'm still airbrushing. I actually got into airbrushing and custom painting, and I'm doing some design work for some of these companies that I mentioned.
Yeah.
I airbrush guitars for Heartstrings for Heroes. They basically give guitars like memorials to veterans and to Gold Star families who've been killed in the line of duty. I recently airbrushed a huge memorial for the guys who got killed in Afghanistan, and just trying to give back and inspire other people through artwork.
Yeah.
One of my things that I talked to one of the guys that I know who's a Green Beret is I would like to do pieces of art and sell them and take that money and buy police departments and refund them. You know, you politicians want to take away, defund the police. Well, how about I do pieces of artwork, give the police departments money to buy them equipment and training for these training venues?
It's awesome, man.
So that's what I'm trying to do now.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah. That's
It's
one
amazing.
of the things that I'm...
You know, I'm glad you did that, especially for the folks from Afghanistan that lost their lives. You have a current administration who says nobody died under their watch.
Yeah.
But let's remember Abbey Gate. Let's remember Jordan not too long ago. Those are American service members that have died under this administration's watch. So for them to be out there on a public debate on CNN saying that nobody's died under their watch is damn fucking disrespectful.
It is. It's sad.
And I hate to sound nasty with my words and stuff, but that's disrespectful. Those are young men and women.
And they sacrificed for this country.
And there's a lot of them that are still with us today that were severely injured, lost limbs, are not the same. And they're standing up and they're finally starting to talk about things. But, you know, our government says nothing happened.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Which
crazy?
Goes back to another point that we addressed earlier in the podcast.
Yeah. It's sad, right? It's awesome, Eddie. I'm honored to have
Thanks for having me
shared this stage with you, because I think there needs to be more individuals like you, Eddie, who need to start coming out and talking about these things and expressing their lives to everybody out here to see what you've gone through, but also to see the things you want to change in our society. You know, because I can sit here and be like, oh, Eddie's a prior cop, you know, gun owner from Florida. Oh, he's a Trumper and he's crazy, he's racist and stuff like that. But no, you just said the things that you want for this country. You want us to, you know, one, I'm sure you want us all to get along. But two, you want change for the people that have done things for this country. You want change to happen for people who are supporting this country, like law enforcement. You're out there painting guitars for people who have lost family members on the line of duty, whether it be in the military or law enforcement. Yet we have a government who doesn't do that for us. We're funding billions and billions of dollars to other nations to fight wars.
Yeah.
But we can't support our own. You know, everybody probably thinks that because veteran law enforcement, we're probably pro-war and stuff like that. Nobody wants to go to war.
No.
You love war when you're a defense contractor, when you have your money in like places like Lockheed Martin and all that stuff. I get it. That's how they make money.
Yeah.
But a lot of us don't want war every single time.
You know, like I said earlier in the podcast, you know, doing this for 10 years and taking guns away from armed career criminals, never not once did we get into a shooting. We don't want to shoot anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't want to kill anybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the media portrays us to be monsters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of patriotic Americans out here who just want to defend the U.S. Constitution and our constitutional republic. And the citizens need to be educated on that fact.
I agree.
And that's how we make this country better.
I just took a trip up north, the East Coast and everything, and I took my kids, and I made sure we stopped at places like D.C. and places in Tennessee and New York and all those places to teach them a little bit about American history. But D.C. was important to me because I wanted to show my kids what the history of this country, you know, where it comes from.
Yeah.
Took my kids to the Marine Corps Memorial. My daughter got to go to the John Basilone gravesite. And she asked, "Who's that? Who's John Basilone?" And it's funny now because she tells people when she says, "Where'd you go, DC? What did you see?" "Oh, I saw a Legends gravesite." John Basilone, man, that's a legend in my eyes.
Have you been to the Marine Corps Museum in down near Quantico?
No, I still yet have to go to that one.
Awesome.
And that's where I want to take them a little bit later when they get a little bit older.
Yeah.
And, my kids got to see DC recently, and they got to see the good old famous house up in Arlington Memorial, the Arlington House, which we know whose house it was, Robert E. Lee's, the man who was portrayed to be this racist individual and stuff. But
he's the exact opposite.
Yeah, exact opposite. He stood against the tyrant government. He was a decorated Army, officer. And when the moment the Army decided to turn on its people and go to war against them, he said, "I'm going to lead my fellow Virginians and people into war against this tyrant government." The same people that we were fighting, that they were claiming for race. And this is why I'm not going to go into a big history lesson.
Yeah.
But when people sit there and say, "Oh, it's because they were fighting against slavery and stuff," the same people fighting against them had slaves in their own plantations.
Yeah.
It wasn't about slavery. It's because they didn't see eye to eye. And this guy, Robert E. Lee, who's portrayed to be this racist individual, was actually a brave individual and went against, his own government because he was like, "I'm not going to let the people go down." He eventually surrendered and did all his thing, and he still lived for many years afterwards there in Virginia and everything. But the government took everything from him, his home, everything, because they didn't like what he stood, and he stood against them. And I took my kids to see these things because I don't want my kids to think that Robert E. Lee and a Confederate flag is some sign of racism. Let's stop victimizing everything.
They're still flown all over the South.
Exactly. Let's stop victimizing things. Let's start telling people the truth of where these things came from. If I have a Confederate flag, doesn't mean I'm a racist. Doesn't mean I'm some rebel or anything. I mean, I don't have a Confederate flag, but you know what I mean?
Right. There's actually a judge. It's somewhere online, and I'm sure it's been censored.
Yeah.
That explains the history of a Confederate flag.
Yeah.
And he's still on the bench.
It's like the history of the American flag and the significance behind it. I don't care if you were kneeling or whatever during your own thing at a basketball or baseball, whatever you're doing, right? That's on you. That's your God-given right to do that. I just find it disrespectful that you shame our American flag. Like recently, the kids burning our flags in Washington, D.C., white kids screaming Allah Akbar. That disgusted me.
Why don't they go to the Middle East and do it?
The stuff that they were saying, Takbir, Allah Akbar, they didn't understand what they were saying. They probably didn't even know what it means, right? But they were saying, because that's the cool thing to do, the trend, tagging Hamas on our monuments. I showed my kids what Washington, D.C. looked like on a normal day recently, and that happened the other day, and I showed them what was happening, and they shook their heads. They shook their heads. My kids, we went during Pride Month, so there was pride flags all over D.C. and everything, and then my kid asked, like, why is there a rainbow up there or whatever? And I explained to her what the rainbow flag means and stuff. And I'm not against homosexuality. Like, if you want to be gay, you want to be whatever, that's fine with me. Don't push it on people. Like, that's all I ask for, right? And my kid asked, and we were having a conversation. And I think the way we're going to change this future of our country is starting off at home, right?
100%.
And my kid asked, somebody said something about a transsexual, and she goes, "What's transsexual?" So she's old enough, so I explained to her what a transsexual is. She goes, "How's that possible, Dad?" And I said, "I'm going to leave it at that, kid. I'm going to let you figure that out in the future. I'm going to let you figure that." And she was like brainstorming in the car, and she goes, "Wait, how can I be a boy if I'm a girl?" And I was just like, "I don't know. You tell me, kid." But she's not being corrupted by all this damn, I have a lot of friends who are gay, and they get mad about how bad people who are not gay are pushing this pride thing and everything.
Oh, the people that I know who are gay,
are upset about it.
They're pissed, and they're pissed about all these pedophiles coming out here and they're grooming kids.
Hollister made millions of dollars during Pride Month a couple of years ago off their Pride section. You know how much they donated out of the millions of dollars?
Probably none.
Like $15K.
Yeah,
it's a tax break.
What is that? What does that tell the community?
They're using you,
right?
And nobody understands it. But Eddie, I don't want to, get too much more.
We can go
all day on that.
Yeah, I know, right?
But I'm glad. I'm honored to have you on.
Thank you.
I feel like I've now made a friendship with another like-minded individual and a good individual. It's always nice to make these friendships, And I promised that everybody I brought on this podcast was somebody that I wanted to have their story out, but somebody that I knew that I was going to stay in their lives for a long time.
Sure.
And make a friendship.
I appreciate it.
And I'm honored, man.
Likewise.
And, again, I want to thank you for your service to our country. I want to thank you for what you did for this country. I want to thank for the opportunity that your swift, actions potentially saved one of our presidents. Whether we like him or not, you saved an American president based off of your actions. And more people like you need to start coming forward and bringing these things to light so that Americans can finally realize what's really going on. I appreciate it, Eddie.
Thank you very much for having me on the show today.
No. Do you have anything else for the viewers, man?
If you want to get into a career with law enforcement, it's going to be tough right now, but I promise you things will get better. And there's millions and tens of millions of Americans out here that support U.S. law enforcement. So don't think because of the media or an organization that I'm not going to talk about, because we don't even need to talk about it, that demonizes the police, or some certain politicians that just demonize the police. Realize this, if you guys are listening to this show, there's tens of millions of people who love you and support you. And it's an awesome, rewarding career. And it's the best show on earth. Front seat to the best show on earth.
I have to agree with that.
So keep training like the guys who are going in it. Just don't take anything for granted. Keep training. Get all the training that you can get, both at the the state level and in the federal level. And we trained with Secret Service at the Secret Service Academy, and I learned a lot of different things about how people do things and tactics that I can't talk about on this show. Strategies and tactics that I was taught, but you will learn them along the way. You know what I mean? And I'll share them with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But just for the viewers, it's an awesome career. And don't listen to the mainstream media. And if you're the police and you want to go into this career, if you do have to use force on somebody, be sure to articulate why you used force on the person. I used to teach use of force to grand juries. So we did a whole presentation of firearms and tasers, and we had grand jury every 3 months, so 4 times a year. So myself and another detective for years, and we alternated. Sometimes I couldn't do it. Used to teach use of force. So just articulate what you do. Why you did what you did if you have to use force on somebody. So.
Well, Eddie, thank you.
Go for it.
Thank you, man. I'm sure everybody's grateful for that. And it's been an honor. It's a privilege. And I can't wait to get inked up on my arms by you, brother.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
I can't wait. We'll follow up with the maybe videos and stuff later on for the viewers and show that this relationship is continued. But thanks, Eddie. I appreciate it. And I'm glad you flew down to Texas. I know that damn hurricane or tropical storm, whatever they want to call it. It was causing trouble for us. I mean, I was down there this weekend, and I was like, "Oh man, I don't know if Eddie's gonna make it." And obviously,
I almost didn't.
You almost didn't. But
the flight got canceled once.
But you're here, man, and I'm thankful for that, and to many more, man. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.